this is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.
Hi, it's Jill Winterstein, host of the Spirit Daughter podcast, where we talk about astrology, natal charts, and how to step into your most vibrant life. And today I'm talking with my dear friend, Krista Williams.
It can change you in the best way possible. Dance with the change, dance with the breakdowns.
The embodiment of Pisces intuition with Capricorn power moves.
So I'm like delusionally proud of my chart.
Listen to the Spirit Daughter podcast starting on February 24th on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your podcasts.
I'm Clayton Eckerd. In 2022, I was the lead of ABC's The Bachelor.
But here's the thing. Bachelor fans hated him.
If I could press a button and rewind it all, I would.
That's when his life took a disturbing turn. A one-night stand would end in a courtroom.
The media is here. This case has gone viral.
The dating contract.
Agree to date me, but I'm also suing you.
This is unlike anything I've ever seen before.
I'm Stephanie Young. Listen to Love Trapped on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
I'm Nancy Glass, host of the Burden of Guilt Season 2 podcast. This is a story about a horrendous lie that destroyed two families. Late one night, Bobby Gumpright became the victim of a random crime. The perpetrator was sentenced to 99 years until a confession changed everything.
I was a monster.
Listen to Burden of Guilt Season 2 on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
What if mind control is real?
If you could control the behavior of anybody around you, what kind of life would you have?
Can you hypnotically persuade someone to buy a car?
When you look at your car, you're going to become overwhelmed with such good feelings.
Can you hypnotize someone into sleeping with you?
I gave her some suggestions to be sexually aroused.
Can you get someone to join your cult?
NLP was used on me to access my subconscious.
Mind Games, a new podcast exploring NLP, aka Neuro-Linguistic Programming. Is it a self-help miracle, a shady hypnosis scam, or both? Listen to Mind Games on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
On April 4th, 1968, Dr. Martin Luther King was shot and killed in Memphis. A petty criminal named James Earl Ray was arrested. Case closed. Right?
James Earl Ray was a pawn for the official story.
Some of the evidence, as far as I was concerned, did not match the circumstances.
This is the MLK tapes. The first episodes are available now. Listen on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
This is Roxane Gay, the host of the Roxane Gay Agenda, the bad feminist podcast of your dreams. Each week, I talk to an interesting person about feminism, race, writing and books and art, food, pop culture, and yes, politics. We can't escape politics. Listen to the Luminary original podcast, The Roxane Gay Agenda, every Tuesday on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
I'm John Gonzalez, the host of SI's new podcast, Sports Illustrated Weekly. Sports Illustrated has delivered some of the best storytelling in sports for 70 years. And now that continues on our show. Each week, we'll dive deep into the best stories from around the sports world. Sports Illustrated Weekly is available every Wednesday on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. Subscribe now.
Hey everybody, Robert Evans here, and I wanted to let you know this is a compilation episode. So every episode of the week that just happened is here in one convenient and with somewhat less ads package for you to listen to in a long stretch if you want. If you've been listening to the episodes every day this week, there's going to be nothing new here for you, but you can make your own decisions. Welcome to It Happens Sometimes, the podcast where it's happened. Shit. Garrison, Chris,
No.
somebody
No.
pick this up.
This is on you.
Anybody?
Nope.
Anybody got help?
Not
Okay.
bailing you out of this one.
Okay, well, you know what podcast this is. You've been listening presumably for months, or this is your first time listening. If so, I've probably lost you already with that Bush League introduction. Jesus Christ. I'm Robert Evans. This is a show about how things fall apart and how to maybe stop them from falling apart as much. And today we're talking to some people who were in kind of the best case scenario situation for having a bunch of authoritarians try to dominate your country. By which I mean we're talking to some Chilean activists who won, in as much as it's possible to win in the world. It's a pretty exciting situation happening there. I'm excited to introduce people to like what's been going on. But first, I want to introduce our guests for today. Y'all wanna say hello?
Hello. My name is Jeremiah. I'm from the United States, but I've lived in Chile for the last 10 years. And
I'm Stephanie.
Go ahead.
I'm a Chilean, and I'm live here with my husband.
Hi, I'm Nicolas. I'm Chilean, and I have been living here for my whole life.
Yeah, so we started a small group called Vecinos Unidos to do some activism to try to get out the vote for the plebiscito to try to last year to get the Constitution approved to be voted on, and it was successful. So we are proud of the small bit of work that we did to help that happen. And so today the Constitution is being written, and it's a very exciting time.
Yeah, and let's pull back a little bit, because the last time we talked about Chile on Behind the Bastards in 2019, when a protest that started as some, I think it's fair to say, Zoomers protesting a fare increase by like jumping fares at the underground, the subway, was met with police doing police stuff, which was met with people taking to the streets in very significant numbers, which is a thing that by now a lot more people are experienced with. But unlike kind of what happened in my country, you did it. You made them blink. And that's what the plebiscite is, right? Like there was an agreement made to give, because Chile was still, if I'm not mistaken, governed under the same constitution that Pinochet had, right?
Yeah.
And Pinochet, famously not a great guy. So I wonder if you might give us kind of an overview of y'all's experience during that time, from like the start of the protests to, oh shit, we might actually get to change things at a pretty fundamental level in our country.
Yeah, so it was an incredible time about exactly 2 years ago. So just the 18th of October was just the 2-year anniversary. And as you said, it all started with literal high schoolers, 16-year-olds who were protesting a 30 peso increase, which is, like 20-cent increase in the metro. But we, of course, have one of the most expensive metros in the world and a very low minimum wage here. And so, as you said, they went out there and started to jump the turnstiles, but in massive groups, hundreds of them going to the metro together and all jumping together. And in response, the government ended up closing the metros. And so it was this Friday night, and we were having dinner, and suddenly the metros were all closed, and everyone had to just walk home from work or dinner or where they were. And that was kind of the beginning of everything. And it was almost like the government brought it on themselves, because suddenly there were thousands of people in the streets just because they had no other way to get home. And from there, there were protests, and the protests were met with extreme police oppression and water cannons and tear gas and all of that. And eventually it led to one march, which had over 1 million people throughout Chile marching, and a series of marches and protests basically every week for months. And finally, it came down to they announced that there would be this plebiscite, and it was a vote, yes or no, to create a new constitution. Because, yes, Chile is still, there were some reforms in the early 2000s to the constitution, but Still, we live under the Constitution written by Jaime Guzman, kind of Pinochet's right-hand man. And we happen to live, Nico is our good friend and also our next door neighbor, and we live about 4 blocks from the plaza, formerly Plaza Italia. Now the protesters have deemed it Plaza Dignidad. And so we've been just in the middle of it. And for a couple months, our whole neighborhood was like a war zone, and just really crazy protests every single day, and tear gas and all of that. And it was really intense for a while, and it still is. Last Friday, we were met with tear gas and water cannons again. So it's even though the Constitution is being written again, and the plebiscite was a year ago, but the police are still out there being bastards.
Yeah. I'm curious what each of you kind of sees as the moment when, or if you, because maybe I was going too optimistic, right? Like, I guess I'm wondering, do you think that a corner has been turned? And if so, what was kind of the moment each of you felt that, like, oh my God, we might actually, this isn't just going to be like showing up to get the shit kicked out of us. We're going to get some, at least, of what we're fighting for.
What do you think, Nico?
Yeah, I mean, I think that like that particular moment was when we finally went to the elections, or what you call the referendum, for this new constitution. And we were kind of skeptic about the percentage of people who approved this new constitution, because a few months ago or a few weeks before this referendum, we had like
polls.
We had the polls, and they were kind of 50-50. So we were kind of skeptic about, are we gonna have a new constitution or not? And the same night, I mean, the process is very quick. So after, I don't know, this thing closed at 6 p.m. and then you have the results like 3 hours later. So on the same day, we were having the results, and it was like 80 against 20. So it was like kind of shocking. I mean, I think that nobody was expecting to have this kind of 80% of the people in Chile were want to, I don't know, throw to the bin the Pinochet constitution. So it was kind of like I don't know, I would say like the best moment.
Yeah, there's an American, a deceased American sociologist who wrote an essay that I find quite influential called "The Shock of Victory," and it's about how activists often fail to take advantage of their momentum, like, because they're kind of surprised at the success early on, and then they don't properly take advantage of what they have when they have it, and progress gets turned back, which I think we've seen happen in the United States in the wake of what happened here last summer. Why do you think that hasn't happened in Chile? What do you think it is that enabled y'all to actually keep the pressure on and take advantage of that moment in time, which never... I guess that's what I'm impressed with the most, is that y'all did manage to make that momentum work for you rather than kind of letting it pull you off balance. And I guess I'm just trying to get a handle on how.
I guess for me, what I think gets lost a lot in the conversation is the primera línea, so the first line of defense. And so you had a bunch of young people, anarchists, just crazy young people who went out there to fight with the cops every single day. And it was really impressive. And a lot of times we, I don't know, I feel like they don't get the credit they deserve because, they're the delinquents, and that, we talk a lot about the big marches when there was 1 million people in the street. And obviously, like Nico said, winning the vote by 79% showed that it was something that everyone in Chile wanted, but it never would have happened if it weren't for this small group of fighters who were there every single day, facing tear gas and water cannons and police beating them up with throwing rocks and stuff like that. So I think that's the main thing. It wasn't like once a month or even once a week. It was every single day, and they were there on the front line. And none of this would be possible without them.
That's fascinating to me because obviously things like that, groups like that existed here, like in Portland, went every night for not as long, but for not an insignificant amount of time. And it was it was a lot of these kind of young anarchist frontliners who were willing to go toe with the cops every night. But you didn't have that kind of larger, more moderate populace backing them up. And I guess one of the things I'm curious about is what was kind of you mentioned you don't think they get the credit they deserve. Was there a broad attitude that like these people are the ones going face to face with the cops so that those of us, people who are older, people who aren't in as good a shape, people who can't physically take as much abuse can still show up? Or was it, I'm kind of curious how those people represented what they were doing and how it was seen by most of kind of the more moderate people who still supported change around you, because that dynamic exists in any mass protest movement, and it worked where you are, and I'm trying to get a handle on maybe how it was different than what I saw in Portland.
So now a lot of them are in jail and or without one eye. So it's really terrible because we have all these new beautiful process, but we are without really a complete democracy with liberty for this guy or democracy for all this person that lose eyes or como resultaron como heridos.
Yeah, and everyone that was injured. A lot of protests nowadays. Actually, I think today, right now, there's a protest going on to free the political prisoners. I think there, even among, obviously 80% of the country voted for the new constitution. So there's a lot of different points of view there. But there was division even among the left. A lot of people said, this is not the way to protest, and we should not be violent and, burning things. And but there was a lot. I mean, you saw a lot of the opposite, where people were saying, just as you said, like, those out there on the front line are the reason that the older people and others can come out and feel safer to protest, because the Primera Linea is kind of taking the brunt of the violence from the police. And that allows the older people and those who are less confrontational to be out there and protest. So for me, some of the most inspiring signs I remember seeing are like folks that are 80 years old and they have signs that say, gracias a la Primera Linea, like thank you to the frontliners who are taking that violence so that they are able, the others, to protest in a more peaceful way.
That's such a fascinating situation to me, that you've got these more radical frontliners who were, as you say, critical in allowing this really groundbreaking change to occur in your society. But at the same time, things haven't changed enough that, number one, the cops who beat the shit out of them, I'm guessing, are still largely employed. And a bunch of them are in jail. Do you have much hope that at the very least there will be something to like get these people out? Or is that maybe a bridge? I don't know. I don't know your country obviously as well as you do. I'm curious, like, do you feel like there's much hope in pushing for that? Because it seems like, those people need to be free.
Yeah, I mean, most of these guys who are in prison, they have spent 12 months in prison without any evidence. So it's only the word of the cops against them. So after 13 months, 14 months, they will finally get released because they have no evidence. Or they may find that the police, they made up all the evidence. So they finally go out. But I mean, you spend almost a year in prison. That's me. It's clearly political. I mean, you're a political prisoner. Like they got you in prison with no evidence, without any proper process. they keep you in prison for a year, and who's gonna pay for that? I mean, you lost a year.
Yeah.
To life.
We're talking so far about the sacrifices made here. What do you think with this new constitution, you and your fellow Chileans, what are you going to get? Like what are the changes that seem to be most concrete and the ones that you think are most important?
I think already it's been groundbreaking. I believe it's the only constitution ever to be written by a plurality of women, and also to have a representation from the indigenous peoples. And so it's already been very inspiring and groundbreaking. The president of the Constitutional Convention is a very inspiring Mapuche leader, woman. And the good thing is that the right, it represents less than 1/3 of the Constitutional Convention, so they don't have the power to block anything as far as only by the right. So we will see, but they literally just started writing the Constitution last week. So
yeah, it's still, but that's, I mean, that's a significant, is there a kind of a broad agreement that one of the things that needed to happen here was a redress of grievances between the indigenous people and the state? Because it sounds like that's a significant chunk of what's been already agreed upon just by like how this is coming together.
Yeah. So, well, Nico could probably tell a lot more about this than I could, but there's a big deal with with the indigenous people in the South and the government basically waging war against the indigenous people. Actually, 2 weeks ago, Piñera, the current right-wing president, declared a state of emergency in the South, and he just extended it for 15 more days. So we have the military in the South, and they are, with the tanks and attacking the Mapuche and other indigenous people there. And so, yeah, a big aspect of Chile right now is the fight between and the oppression of the government against the native people. And it's a cultural thing too. I mean, it's really heavy. Most people here in Chile are mixed, between the natives and the white men and everything, and the Europeans. But the Mapuche and the other indigenous groups have really not received a lot of respect in the last 30 years. And so, yeah, that's a big aspect.
Yeah, I will say, for me, it's very inspiring to have the president of this new constitution to be a Mapuche woman. So, I guess the most important thing, the thing that these indigenous people want to claim is their land. I mean, land for them is the most important thing, and that's what the government, for the last 300 years, they have been taking to them, and they are now trying to claim again their space. So, I mean, let's hope that this new constitution will bring them back their land and the respect that they deserve.
Now, there's been a lot of discussion about this new constitution as, I think the term used is an ecological constitution. And it's the necessity of it addressing a lot of the climate, not just climate change, but a lot of the things caused by climate change, like unequal access to water. There's been discussion. I think Ezio Costa of the FIMA NGO is arguing currently that the Constitution needs to enshrine a human right to water and recognize it as a common good. It's obviously, again, they're writing it this week, so it's kind of unclear if that's going to happen. But I'm wondering kind of what y'all think it's actually, because as you've talked about, with the protests ongoing, with the military being deployed in the South, this is not a finished fight. It's just a fight that a lot of progress has been made on. What do you think is reasonable to expect from this new constitution in terms of climate change, in terms of ecological justice?
I will say
the right of water.
Mm-hmm.
So water is privatized here. So Chileans here in Santiago, we have to pay a Spanish company for our water.
Sure. Yeah.
I would say like the economy in this country is based on like extractivism. So you have like the most productive thing is mining, and then you have like forestry, and all these things like they have an enormous impact on the environment. And the people in Chile, I mean, the people who live like, right next to these kind of things, they don't get anything from them. I mean, the poorest places are like right next to the forestries, right next to the mining. So it's kind of like we are creating a lot of income from these things, but we're not getting anything from them. And also it's not like a thing like let's get everything back to the state. I mean, to the state, because it's more than that. It's just like ecological equality, equity.
Yeah.
Sure.
It's not saying we should take all of the private water and give it to the state, as much as it's saying everyone who lives here has a personal right to enough water to survive.
Exactly.
Yeah. So you have towns where small little towns, and they don't have any water to drink because all of their water is going to the farm owned by Nestle to make to grow avocados to sell to Europe and the United States. So it's a pretty crazy thing.
One of the things that's most interesting to me about y'all's situation is you are in a place where, not entirely dissimilar from the United States, you have a police and a military that are heavily dominated by right-wing ideology. Obviously, like the United States is partly responsible for that in your case. We funded it for a very long time. And so it's still an ongoing fight, but at the same time, clearly the people are unhappy enough with that situation and they were able to force the folks with guns to recognize that they can't hold on to everything that they wanted to hold on to. And I guess I'm how can we do that? I'm very impressed by watching from the sidelines. I was just so happy to see this not go where I think we were all scared it might go, in either the direction of like Syria, where it turns into this horrible bloodbath, or where everything gets crushed, I'm wondering like why you think on a broader scale, what do you think was responsible for those people with access to the guns deciding we can't hold on to this? Like, I'm so intensely curious about that, because it's important for a lot of people in a lot of other parts of the world.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think it was just the protest and the daily protests and just getting out
keeping
there,
pressure.
Keeping the pressure on. And at some point, it's like, hey, this is not good for the economy, all of the rich people and, the 10 families that are in control of, 60 or 70% of the wealth of the country.
Inequality.
Yeah. And they, at some point, had to recognize that this was something that had reached its boiling point, and they could no longer respond with just force, because they tried it and it didn't work for months, and it was just months and months of protests, and obviously that caused a hit to the economy, and that caused a hit to the wallets of the ultra rich. And so at some point they realized that they had no other move to play than to accept it in some way. And that's how we got, this new constitution that is being written.
One thing I'm interested about is the geography of the protests, because I know Chile is a very urban population, and also it's like a quarter of the population or something lives in Santiago. or like in that area. And so I'm
More than
wondering.
a third, I think.
More than half,
Wow.
Almost half.
Yeah.
So
Although
I'm wondering. Sorry.
I just want to note, if I'm not mistaken, there were only 5. You have kind of communes instead of states, is what they're called. Like 10 voted in favor of the referendum and only 5 voted against it, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, communes are within cities. Like, so
within
Santiago
city,
has
yeah.
different communes.
Gotcha.
It's like boroughs in New York, but we have different regions instead of states.
Right.
And I think they all voted.
Yeah, there might be like 7 who voted.
But what you might be thinking of, Robert, you might be thinking of communes in Santiago, where Santiago is very, so it's all on the Rio Mapocho, the river, which goes east to west across the city. And basically you have this like very rich part on the east and up into the hills. And then it gets poorer and poorer as you go to the west. And for the vote for the Constitution, it was everyone voted for the Constitution except for these communes, these ultra rich in the east. Yeah.
Oh wow, amazing. Okay.
So something I was also curious about this was, so when the protests were going on, because Chile's had like huge protests before. I mean, even the last sort of decade. What I was interested also with this time is like, well, A, what do you think is different about this than say like 2011, 2013? And then B, in terms of like the geographic breakdown of where people are and where they're going, is it that, so you have this class divide in the city, but were the working class districts like, were people staying there in those districts, or were they like moving from those places like to protest inside of the richer urban areas?
I would say we have like many protests in the past, but they were more kind of like, I don't know, like students protests, and then you have like, I know, like the university protests. But when we have like this protest like the one we have in 2019, is like something that unites everyone. I mean, you don't have to be a student, you don't have to go to university to protest. I mean, it's something that is affecting everyone. I mean, the fares of the metro, they affect everything, and the inequality in the country affects everyone. So I mean, I guess that's the thing that make this protest of the 2019 unique in this term.
Yeah, and I think it was actually a problem when all the protests were happening. A lot of people were saying, we can't keep going to the plaza. The cops are just going to wait for us in the plaza, and, it's going to be a shit show, and we need to, protest all over. And there were protests across Chile in every single major city. But I will say the majority of the protests have been here in the plaza and close to La Moneda, where the presidential palace, and but some of the most memorable protests,
and the Costanera Center too,
and the Costanera Center, the tallest building in Latin America, which is a mall and a monument to this idea that Piñera has of Chile being an oasis in South America. Like, we're not like other countries. We're like the United States. We're this capitalist oasis, and exactly. But yeah. So some of the most memorable protests, they weren't super common, but were exactly that, where the people said, you know what, we're not going to the plaza. We're going to Costanera Center, or we're going to Vitacura. We're going to where the millionaires live, where they work. And those were really powerful. And so that's when you started to see like all of those banks and malls and just blocks and blocks of what the rich folk like to call Sanhattan, Santiago, Manhattan, the skyscraper part of the city. And it was just all boarded up, because there were definitely a couple weeks where the protest went that way. And yeah, it was inspiring.
What I keep coming back to when I look about like why it worked it wasn't because the frontliners just kept the pressure up, because the frontliners did in a lot of places. Here, the frontliners stayed out well after everyone else stopped coming out. It's that the population kept up the pressure. Like there were like Chile as a nation, as a people, kept up the pressure in a pretty significant way, as opposed to kind of fading back after the first couple of weeks. And I mean, I'm sure the question of why it happened has a lot to do with, like you said, inequality, things that have been going on for decades. It's a complex situation, but it does seem like that's one of the big takeaways, that if you can secure, even in a pretty terrifying situation, a lot of concessions, a lot of what you need, but people have to keep putting themselves out there.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say it's a couple things. One is, as you mentioned, I think it's like the culture of protests here, especially in the last 10 years, like with the Revolución Pingüino in 2011, in 2011, and there were...
And the 8M.
And the feminist protests, the 8M. And so it's not something that just happened 2 years ago. It's the last decade or two has been the people, especially the young people, going out there and protesting. And that's one thing that's inspiring about Boric, the candidate for president. The election is next month. So the left-wing candidate, Boric, and he came out of that movement. He was a student protester and a leader of the student movement. And so I think it's like it grew out of that. It grew out of kids in high school saying, this is just what we do. This is normal. We go out there and protest when shit happens. And the other thing is, we always say here in Chile, after the protest started, it's not 30 pesos, it's 30 years, 30 years of neoliberalism, of this revolving door of center right and center left, and just continuing on with the economic oppression. And the other thing I feel like people don't understand is that, people either think Chile is like the United States or they think it's like Peru or something, and it's really neither. In Chile, the minimum wage is half of what the United States is, which is already terrible.
Yeah.
But the cost of living here is almost the same as you guys in Portland. I mean, not the housing probably, but the
food
cost
and
of living
stuff.
Here, yeah, it's like Europe. I could move to Berlin and live cheaper than here. But
it is hard
to have a minimum wage of 3 times that, So I think that's the other thing is people just they had no other choice, and they were just bore down by 30 years, after 20 years of a dictatorship, 30 years of this terrible wages and just neoliberalism, and so I think. It's partially that, and partially just like the culture of protests that grew out of the student movements in the early 2000s.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there was one thing I was also interested about that I don't remember seeing much of at the time. Was what was Chilean organized labor doing during this?
It's a good question. Honestly, labor hasn't been a big part of the protests, at least from my point of view. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it took a pretty strong hit during the Pinochet years, if I'm not mistaken. So there was kind of that, like, I guess that does make sense.
Sure. Yeah. Honestly, I don't know a whole lot about labor history here in Chile, but yeah, it definitely is. I mean, you would see, union groups in the street here and there, but definitely they weren't a leading voice in the protest, I would say.
Yeah. So I guess that leads into the other. I guess one of the other things that, from my understanding, has been happening all across Latin America, but in Chile in particular, is the rise of the informal sector and people just sort of not having access to sort of stable wages and labor. And I'm wondering about, okay, so organized labor, like so the classical unions aren't really involved in this. And I guess I'm interested in how, if I'm right that you're dealing with a lot of people who aren't doing traditional labor stuff, what was the process that was able to get people mobilized? Is like especially people who just have no sort of like people who are in the informal sector and people who aren't involved in the sort of older classical organizations.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess I would just say it's like that culture of protest that comes from the young people in the last 20 years. And then, of course, the older folks who, lived through the dictatorship. And of course, there were an incredible protest at that time, too. And so I don't know. I mean, honestly, I was, even after living here for 6 years, I was shocked. I never thought it would come to this. I never thought I would see over 500,000 people in the streets of Santiago, and I would never thought we'd see a new constitution. So I don't know. I don't have the answers. It's surprising to me, but what I will say though is I don't want to paint a rosy portrait of Chile right now, because if like we mentioned, tomorrow night, if you guys go to Galleria Cima, CIMA on YouTube or Instagram, they have a live feed of the plaza 4 blocks from our house. And every Friday, the protests come out, and sometimes the cops are there right away, and they make a whole perimeter with 200 cops and all of the, tanks and everything, blocking entrance to the plaza in every direction. Sometimes they let the people protest, but then at 10 o'clock, after the sun comes down, they come out there, and, it's the same thing. We had a young woman was killed a couple of weeks ago.
Jesus.
And, so, and the other thing is that we have this election coming up, and this guy, Cast, extreme right-winger, Pinochetista, just like they call him the Chilean Bolsonaro, just like a real piece of shit. And he has really risen in the polls in the last month or two. The right-wing candidate Sichel, who won the right-wing primaries and was kind of going to be the successor to Piñera, the current right-wing president, because in Chile, you can't have consecutive terms. But Sichel just kind of was not a great candidate and kind of blew it, and he went down, and now Cast is going up, and it's really scary to think about Cast getting into the second round, where it will probably be him versus Boric, and so even though the Constitution was approved by 79% of the country, it's very possible that this election is going to come down to a runoff between a, moderate socialist like Boric, not the most extreme leftist, in fact, known as Amarillo, very yellow-bellied here in Chile. That's his nickname. But it will probably, right now, it's looking like it's going to come down to him and Cast, who is like almost a return to the dictatorship. So it's pretty scary.
Jeez. So it's just this, there's just so much fighting to do.
Never ends.
There's just so much fighting to do. Do any of you have anything else you want to make sure you say or talk about before we kind of close out for the day?
I don't know. I will say like 3 days ago, I just pay I finally paid my whole student loan. It was like I've been working for more than 10 years in my life, since I finished university, and I've been wasting, all my savings, I just pay this fucking student loan. I guess that you guys in the United States are like the same. Like I don't know.
Well, except for people don't pay off their student loan.
Yeah, we just
okay.
don't. It just stays there forever.
And I would like to wish to the coming people that, I mean, I don't wish that future for for the future people in this country. I don't wish anyone that. I mean, university, I mean, all students should be studying for free. I mean, it's like inconceivable for me.
Yeah. So that was a big part of it. And then also the AFP pension system here, which is totally privatized. And so the government just takes your money for retirement. You get to choose between 4 or 5 options, which are private companies. And then if you make money, then the company takes, their chunk of your retirement as the payment for managing your fund. But if you lose money, then it's on you. So literally, Steffi's mom is like, checking on her retirement. How did I do this year? It's like, oh, you lost $2,000 this year. That's your retirement savings, So you have, people here trying to live on, retirements of $100 a month, while the military is receiving $10,000 a month, So that was a big part of it. But I think what I always come back to here in Chile is, like we've said, the activist renamed the Plaza Dignidad. And that's what it all comes down to, is just, we're not asking for, ponies, as Hillary Clinton would say. We're not asking for the moon. We're just asking for basic dignity that everyone deserves. And it's as simple as that. So we just have to cross our fingers and hope that we've done enough that at a minimum, people can live and retire with some dignity. That's all.
Yeah, and that enough ecological justice can be gained that people can survive what's coming.
Exactly.
Which it's nice to see, at the very least, that's a central topic of discussion. Whereas in the United States, everyone in power seems fine with just ignoring the increasing problems for now. So I don't know. I also don't want to be painting too rosy a picture. As you've made repeatedly clear, there's a lot of struggle left still. But at least you've achieved a lot, and I'm just heartened by hearing your story, and hope that more people pay attention to what's happened there and try to take lessons from it, because I think we all need to be gearing up, as I'm sure y'all will continue to do. Anything else before we close out?
No, that's it. I mean, I completely agree. I think that just like the message is that, like, better things are possible. Like real change can happen. Like this started 2 years ago with high schoolers protesting, and now we're going to have a vote on a new constitution, and it's going to be an ecological constitution, a plurinational national constitution, with respect for the indigenous people. It's written by
Hi, this is Joe Winterstein, host of the Spirit Daughter podcast, where we talk about astrology, natal charts, and how to step into your most vibrant life. And I just sat down with a Minnie Driver.
The Irish traveler said when I was 16, you're going to have a terrible time with men.
Actor, storyteller, and unapologetic Aquarian visionary. Aquarius is all about freedom-loving and different perspectives, and I find a lot of people with strong placements in Aquarius are misunderstood. A Sun and Venus in Aquarius in her 7th house spark her unconventional approach to partnership.
He really has taught me to embrace people sleeping in different rooms, on different houses, in different places, but just an embracing of the isness of it all.
If you're navigating your own transformation or just want a chart side inside view into how a leading artist integrates astrology, creativity, and real life, this episode is a must listen. Listen to the Spirit Daughter podcast starting on February 24th on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your podcasts.
I'm Clayton Eckerd, and in 2022, I was the lead of ABC's The Bachelor.
Unfortunately, it didn't go according to plan. He became the first Bachelor to ever have his final rose rejected. The internet turned on him.
If I could press a button and rewind it all, I would.
But what happened to Clayton after the show made even bigger headlines. It began as a one-night stand and ended in a courtroom, with Clayton at the center of a very strange paternity scandal.
The media is here. This case has gone viral.
The dating contract.
Agree to date me, but I'm also suing you.
Please search warrant.
This is unlike anything I've ever seen before.
I'm Stephanie Young. This is Love Trapped. This season, an epic battle of he said, she said, and the search for accountability in a sea of lies.
I have done nothing except get pregnant by the Bachelor!
Listen to Love Trapped on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
What if mind control is real?
If you could control the behavior of anybody around you, what kind of life would you have?
Can you hypnotically persuade someone to buy a car?
When you look at your car, you're going to become overwhelmed with such good feelings.
Can you hypnotize someone into sleeping with you?
I gave her some suggestions to be sexually aroused.
Can you get someone to join your cult?
NLP was used on me to access my subconscious.
NLP, aka Neuro-Linguistic Programming, is a blend of hypnosis, linguistics, and psychology. Fans say it's like finally getting a user manual for your brain.
It's about engineering consciousness.
Mind Games is the story of NLP. Its crazy cast of disciples and the fake doctor who invented it at a New Age commune and sold it to guys in suits. He stood trial for murder and got acquitted. The biggest mind game of all? NLP might actually work.
This is wild.
Listen to Mind Games on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
1969. Malcolm and Martin are gone. America is in crisis. And at Morehouse College, the students make their move.
These students, including a young Samuel L. Jackson, locked up the members of the Board of Trustees, including Martin Luther King Sr. It's the true story of protest and rebellion in Black American history that you'll never forget. I'm Hans Charles.
I'm Menelik Lumumba.
Listen to The A Building on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
An equal amount of men and women and everything. And so, yeah, just I think for me, it's so easy for us who have grown up in, under the gloom of neoliberalism to just get really depressed and fatalistic about it. And so for me, I feel the same way. Like it's just such an inspiration. And the Chilean and especially the Chilean youth. But yeah, it's just an inspiration and proof that change can happen. But it's not just voting. And, like Chileans have elected socialists, the former president was a socialist, but it was just the same neoliberalism bullshit. So I think, voting is great, but like, that's just not enough. And so you have to, get out in the streets and try to organize and make real change in other ways as well.
All right. Yeah, I agree entirely. Thank you all for coming on. I couldn't appreciate it more. And I hope you have a lovely rest of your day and a lovely continuing to stick it to the sons of bitches.
Conquer your New Year's resolution to be more productive with the Before Breakfast podcast. In each bite-sized daily episode, time management and productivity expert Laura Vanderkam teaches you how to make the most of your time, both at work and at home. These are the practical suggestions you need to get more done with your day.
Just as lifting weights keeps our bodies strong as we age, learning new skills is the mental equivalent of pumping iron.
Listen to Before Breakfast wherever you get your podcasts.
Raffi is the voice of some of the happiest songs of our generation.
Baby Beluga.
So, who is the man behind Baby Beluga?
Every human being wants to feel respected. When we start with young children, all good things can grow from there.
I'm Chris Garcia, comedian, new dad, and host of Finding Raffi, a new podcast from iHeartRadio and Fatherly. Listen every Tuesday on the iHeartRadio app or wherever you get your podcasts.
Hey, Lethal listeners. Tig here. Last season on Lethal Lit, you might remember I came to Hollow Falls on a mission, clearing my Aunt Beth's name and making sure justice was finally served. But I hadn't counted on a rash of new murderers tearing apart the town. My mission put myself and my friends in danger, though it wasn't all bad.
I'm gonna be real with you, Tig. I like you.
But now, all signs point to a new serial killer in Hollow Falls. If this game is just starting, you better believe I'm gonna win. I'm Tig Torres, and this is Lethal Lit.
Catch up on Season 1 of the hit murder mystery podcast, Lethal Lit, a Tig Torres mystery, out now. And then tune in for all new thrills in Season 2, dropping weekly starting February 9th. Subscribe now to never miss an episode. Listen to Lethal Lit on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome back to It Could Happen Here, the show that is only introduced competently when either someone besides me is the one hosting the episode, or when I have a guest that I feel embarrassed about being incompetent in front of, and this is the latter case, because today I'm talking with my friend and admired colleague Molly Conger. Molly, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
I got to do that like a professional. Welcome to the show. That's like an NPR shit, right?
I know. People have been saying on the Twitch stream that I have a very soothing NPR-style voice.
You do. You would be great. I would love to hear you talking in NPR about how it's rad that those people broke the windows on those police cars or whatever.
No, I can't be allowed
allegedly.
in respectable spaces. I can't be allowed there. They let me talk on a panel at Harvard one time, and I accidentally said fuck in front of a bunch of people.
I mean, I assume Harvard students know a fuck word or two.
They know that one.
Speaking of fuck words, there's a couple of fuck words who are under trial right now for inciting mass violence that led to human death and suffering. You want to give us the overview? We're talking today about, the Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville in 2017 that led to 3 deaths, one as the result of direct violence. Heather Heyer, who was murdered by the fascist James Field, currently in prison for forever. Yeah, forever. That, his trial concluded a while ago, but there has been churning through the legal system a trial against Richard Spencer, Jason Kessler, who was the main organizer, Cantwell. There's other plaintiffs, right?
Goodness gracious!
Yeah, a lot of fascists about all of the things that they did. The fact that they clearly intended this to be a violent riot, assault, whatever. Like they wanted to have it be a fucking lynching, essentially. And there's a lot of evidence, including things they said to each other about building armies to murder people. Anyway, Molly, you want to take it from here? I think I've introduced the situation. There's a trial going on. You have been listening to every day of it and covering it on Twitch very ably. And so I just kind of wanted to catch up with you. You also wrote an article in Slate with our friend Emily Gorchinsky about what's like largely the jury selection of the trial. So I was wondering if you could just kind of give us an overview of what's happened so far, if your thoughts on it. And yeah, that seems good.
Yeah, so there's just right at the outset, this is a civil trial, right? This is not a criminal trial. No one's going to jail at the end of this. Some of them are already in jail.
We call it.
Yeah. What's that?
The Hoosgow. We call it the Hoosgow on the show. That's the proper term.
Hoosgow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Some of them are already in jail. Obviously, like you said, James Fields is serving 29 life sentences.
That's a lot of life.
That's a lot of life. So he was charged in Virginia state court by the Commonwealth of Virginia. He was convicted at trial of first-degree murder and several counts of aggravated malicious wounding. He was So that trial happened in 2018. He actually went to trial for that. But then he pleaded guilty in federal court. So he was charged in 2 separate courts for the same underlying events. And in federal court, he pleaded guilty to 29 federal hate crimes. He pleaded guilty to hate crimes. So there's no debate about whether these were hate crimes, right?
Yeah.
And he pleaded guilty to avoid the death penalty because a hate crime murder is a capital crime. So in this lawsuit, right, this civil lawsuit against Deep Breath, Jason Kessler, Richard Spencer, Christopher Campbell, James Alex Field, Vanguard America, Andrew Anglin, Moonbase Holdings, Robert Amador Ray, Nathan D'Amico, Elliot Klein, Identity Europa, Matthew Parrott, Matthew Heimbach, Traditionalist Worker Party, Michael Hill, Michael Tubbs, League of the South, Jeff Scoop, National Socialist Movement, Nationalist Front, Augustus Sol Invictus, Fraternal Order of the Alt Knights, Mike Pinovich, Loyal White Knights of the KKK, East Coast Knights of the KKK, East Coast Knights of the True Invisible Empire. Several of those parties have been dismissed from the suit. That's a lot. It's a lot of bad guys, right? Mm-hmm. Several of those parties have been dismissed from the suit. Augustus Invictus defaulted. Pinovich got dismissed early on.
Does that mean, the fact that he defaulted, does that mean he was like, yes?
Right, he offered no defense.
Yeah, so that's what that means. Yeah, I mean, he's been dealing with a lot. What with he and
he's had some problems. He's been in and out of jail,
right?
He abducted his wife at gunpoint.
Yeah.
I think he's out of jail now, but he's had some personal problems. He's had some problems.
Issue, yeah.
So the underlying claim of the lawsuit is a Section 1985 complaint, a conspiracy to deprive people of civil rights. This is fundamentally, at its core, an anti-Klan statute, right? It was designed to disrupt Klan organizing. And that's kind of what it's being used for here, right? This is not
the KKK is a party to the suit. Yeah.
So the lawsuit was brought by 9 plaintiffs who were harmed, people who got hurt at the rally. Most of the plaintiffs were physically injured in the car attack, although not all of them. But these are people who are seeking damages, right? Like for all the emotional weight, all the sort of social ramifications, fundamentally this is a case about damages. So the jury is going to say, okay, these people were harmed. Do we believe they were harmed by a conspiracy to commit acts of violence, conspiracy to commit racially motivated acts of violence, right? So all of those elements have to be proved.
Did the KKK guys want to do racial violence when they assaulted people? Yeah.
Was there a conspiracy?
Yeah.
Was it motivated by racial animus? And were overt acts of violence committed? And did those acts of violence harm these people in a way that entitles them to damages? That's all the jury has to decide. Right?
Should be an open shut case. Not a law knower, but it does seem like kind of an open and shut case.
It does, right? So I guess if there are people out there who are not familiar with the events of that day, a lot of alt-right groups, overt neo-Nazi organizations, the literal Klan, the literal American Nazi Party, like neo-Confederate secessionist
David
groups.
Duke was there.
David Duke was there. David Duke, who Elliot Klein described as an ideological grandfather when he was asking other organizers if he can invite him. These guys came together. They came to Charlottesville. They brawled in the streets. They beat people. They hit them with shields. A literal Klan wizard fired his gun at a black man while screaming, "Die, N-word."
Well, now, okay, it seems like you're reaching a bit to call that racially motivated.
Well, that's something they're trying to litigate now, right?
Amazing.
I don't want to... You're probably familiar with the video of DeAndre Harris being beaten nearly to death by members of several different hate groups, right? So one of the guys that beat him was a TWP member, one of them was a League of the South member, and they worked together to beat this young man nearly to death while he was lying on the ground. And so today they were talking about well, can we really say that was racially motivated? Can we really say?
Can we really say? Yeah.
Yeah, I think we can. I think we can. His mother has been on podcasts since his conviction. I'm referring to Jacob Goodwin, the TWP member, the man who used a TWP riot shield provided to him by Matthew Heimbach to beat this young man. His mother goes on Nazi podcasts still to describe how her son is a martyr for the white cause. There's no ambiguity.
But where are you getting racially motivated from that, Mom?
Right. There's a picture of her with her arm around her son. Her son is 7 feet tall. He's a giant boy. She's got her arm around her large adult son, and he's wearing a T-shirt with a giant picture of George Lincoln Rockwell on it.
So, you love the deep cuts.
At Billy Roper's Christmas party.
Yeah. Another Nazi.
Right. So there's not a lot of ambiguity here for the average person. But So, like you were saying, Emily, and I wrote about jury selection. Jury selection is, court proceedings are, generally speaking, open to the public. Anyone can go to their local courthouse and you can sit through a trial. You can sit through the voir dire process. You can see how a jury gets chosen.
Yeah. You can go trial hopping, get wasted, Like,
free entertainment. As long as you sit quietly, they can't make you leave.
That's right. It's like a library. Sorry.
Very discouraging because the whole point is to pick jurors who've never encountered reality. You pick people who don't have any opinions, right? Because you want them to be able to be impartial. And the best way to make sure your jury is going to be impartial is to pick people who don't have any opinions. And if you don't have any opinions on whether or not it's good for Nazis to beat people in the streets, I would say that in and of itself is an opinion that you already have, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The ability to not have an opinion about that. So the jury selection took 3 days because they had to go through this process of speaking to each juror individually. Usually they'll do it in batches where they ask questions of people in batches. But this was so sensitive, they didn't want to taint the jury pool, so they did it one by one. So it took 3 days. And they chose jurors who didn't have opinions about the existence of racism in the United States.
Okay, that seems unbiased. Again, it's this thing you keep seeing where it's like, well, we can't let people have a bias, so it has to be people who have never heard of white supremacy, which is like, well, then that's a bias in favor of white supremacy. But of course, that's the default of the system. It's like, that's the tear, right? Like you stick white supremacy on the scale and you tear it, but then you add awareness of white supremacy and suddenly there's weight on it, It's very frustrating.
Yeah,
I know it's frustrating. I shouldn't.
It was frustrating to sit through listening to them to ask people, because they had to fill out a questionnaire ahead of time, so so they can sort of sift through obvious no's. And one of the questions was, how do you feel about, how concerned are you about these different kinds of prejudice? Prejudice against Black people, prejudice against Hispanic people, prejudice against Jewish people, or prejudice against white people. And a lot of people indicated that they were very concerned about anti-white racism.
Oh, good.
Right? And a lot of jurors were asked follow-up questions about like, well, why aren't you more concerned about anti-white racism? Why did you say you don't care about that? Well, because it's not real.
Yeah, because I've never seen it in my entire life. But okay.
So, but we seated a jury. We did seat a jury, and there were, there's always concern in a case like this that you just won't be able to get an impartial jury. But it could be worse, right? It could be worse. There is a guy on the jury who said that in high school he was the victim of a racially motivated attack by a Samoan person because they didn't like white people.
So, I wonder what that person was doing / saying.
Black people who believe that they have a right to exist without being subjected to racism, not impartial, can't be on the jury. But a white guy who says he was the victim of a hate crime because someone didn't like Howleys, jury. He's on the jury.
God. So people talking about like, I don't like it when folks not from my island come here and fuck shit up and make it expensive. Yeah, that's anti-white racism.
He was living in Hawaii.
Incredible.
So it could be a worse jury. It could be a worse jury, but it's not ideal. God, where did we go from there? It's been a little bit of a blur. So Cantwell and Spencer don't have lawyers.
Right. Well, yeah. Okay. So, right. Because Cantwell is, for people who aren't aware, Cantwell is representing himself. And correct me if I'm wrong here, but he started by acknowledging the old saying that a person who represents themselves has a fool as a lawyer, but then said, but I'm not a fool in this case.
Yeah, he said, you may have heard this,
mm-hmm.
but that's not true here. That's not the case here.
Unbelievable. Just incredible.
He said, and I didn't even stay in a Holiday Inn Express last night.
Oh my God, really? He seriously made a Holiday Inn Express joke while he was on. Oh my God.
But the follow-up was, but I did stay in the Central Virginia Regional Jail. Because that is where he's staying.
Yeah,
right
I mean,
now,
because he's in prison for sexually or not for harassing and threatening and blackmailing another Nazi, right?
Yeah. He was transported here from the federal prison in Marion, Illinois, where he is a guest until next Christmas. So he had filed motions to exclude the fact that he's currently incarcerated, as is his right? Like if you are a
yeah, absolutely. I don't think that's bad.
In a criminal case or in a civil case, it is your right to have the jury not see you in a jumpsuit, and I respect that. And I think that's good. I think that's important.
Absolutely, yeah.
So he went to great lengths to make sure that the jury would never see him in cuffs, that the marshals wouldn't bring him in irons, that he would change before the jury arrived at the courthouse. All very reasonable, and no one was going to get to talk about it.
Yeah.
But he brought it up in his own opening statement. He told them, hey, I'm here from prison. I'm here from prison.
By the way, I'm in prison for the other crimes I committed, but they're not related to these crimes.
They're not related to these crimes, except to the extent that he's unable to shut the fuck up. He's only in prison because he emailed the FBI a recording of him doing the crime that he's in prison for.
He's really a very cunning man.
But I think, so as much as those crimes aren't relevant to this case, I think it is very relevant to his trial strategy, right? That he has this belief that all the things he did that were wrong, they were right, actually. He just needs to explain to us why he did them, and then we'll understand, right? He's in prison because he tried to talk his way out of a thing that he did that was wrong by telling everyone that he did do it. Like, yes, I did it because I had to. But you didn't have to make an extortionate threat to rape another man's wife in front of their children. You didn't actually have to do that.
Yeah, that's really, I might argue, and perhaps I'm an extremist, but there's no situation in which you would ever have to do that.
Nobody made you email the FBI about how you did that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But you did.
I think the FBI would have told you that was a bad idea.
I mean, there's some snarky stuff in some of the affidavits about how, like, he called the Keene Police Department trying to tattletale on other people so often that they were tired of taking his calls.
Unbelievable. What an amazing man. Like, he's a piece of shit, but he is legitimately an incredible person.
I mean, if you wrote this, no one would believe it, right? This is so heavy-handed. It's so goofy. Like when he was paying Elmer in guns.
Yeah, he paid his lawyer in guns, and then he ran out of guns and his lawyer stopped working for him.
Yeah, so he doesn't have a lawyer anymore because he ran out of guns to pawn. Although I guess he can't anymore because now he's a convicted felon.
I gotta say, running out of guns to pawn for your lawyer, it's pretty cucked.
He even had to sell the bucket of loose bullets he used to keep as a prop on his desk. I mean, really devastating stuff. So he doesn't have
you're down to you're down to the rails when you're doing that.
Really the bottom of the barrel. So he's proceeding pro se, which unfortunately for everyone involved, means he gets to talk a lot, which means he gets to cross-examine his own witnesses, right? So the first two witnesses the plaintiffs put on were two of their plaintiffs, right? Two young people who were injured in these events. The first witness they put on, Natalie, was a UVA student who had her skull fractured in the car attack. She had to learn how to walk again. She had to see a neurologist to retrain her eyes to track movement. I mean, she was very badly injured. And so she testified at length about the damage that was done to her, because again, this is a case about damages. So the jury needs to learn, who is this person? What happened to them? What did it cost them physically, mentally, emotionally, financially? Because what they're going to be asked to do is to put a dollar amount on it. So they had to meet her and hear about her injuries, and hear about her motivation for being there. She's a young queer Latina woman. She's the first college student in her family. She's a very impressive young woman, and she was very composed on the stand, as awful as the content was. But then every single one of the defendants gets to cross-examine her. Richard Spencer gets to cross-examine her. Christopher Cantwell gets to cross-examine her. James Kolenich, who took the case, he's Kessler, D'Amigo, and Identity Europa's lawyer, James Kolenich. He's an Ohio-based attorney who said on the record that he took this case with the express purpose of opposing Jewish influence.
Great.
Kolenich gets to cross-examine her. Matt Heimbach's new lawyer, Josh Smith, who used to be the campaign spokesman for Paul Nealon. He's
Paul
a Holocaust-denying...
was endorsed by Trump at one point in his run for Congress, and is also just a straight-up Nazi who's repeatedly threatened to murder you.
Yeah. One time he spent all day posting pictures of a deer that he said that he named after me. He said, I named this deer Molly. He spent all day stalking it, posting pictures of it, posting pictures of his gun. And then he posted a picture of the deer staged like a lynching. And then he spelled my name out in its entrails and posted pictures of that. So you're just like a really normal guy, Paul Nealon. Totally... completely with it. His campaign spokesperson when he ran for Congress was the Holocaust-denying former Jew Josh Smith. Josh Smith was born Daniel Nussbaum. He changed his name to hide his Jewish past.
Oh, wow. That is an old story among the Nazis. I mean, we talked about the guy who invented sea monkeys, but yeah, it's basically the same case. And you know who else hides their identity? Oh, no. Oh, okay. This was meant to be an ad plug. Normally, Sophie would jump in and stop me from doing that. None of these advertisers are plaintiffs in the current case that you're covering. That's a guarantee. That is an absolute promise.
David Duke is not about to sell you dick pills.
No. Although he could use them. We're back. All right, Molly. Sorry. Please continue.
God, where were we? I got distracted thinking about David Duke trying to sell you dick pills.
Yeah, that's not good for anybody.
Right, so everybody gets to cross-examine the witness. Josh Smith is Heimbach's new lawyer. Kalenich used to be a lot of these guys' lawyers, and then he sort of dropped them over time as they became uncooperative. There were all these motions to withdraw.
Yeah.
So Kalenich slowly dropped clients over the last 2 years. He dropped Cantwell as a client because Cantwell wouldn't stop posting about hurting Roberta Kaplan.
Right.
Who's the lead counsel for the plaintiffs. Roberta Kaplan, famous Jewish lesbian lawyer. You know, she was on the USV Windsor. I'm losing it. Absolutely losing it. The Supreme Court case that gave us gay marriage, right? Roberta Kaplan brought us gay marriage, essentially.
Yeah.
So she, famous Jewish lesbian. That is a well-known portion of her identity. And Cantwell kept posting anti-Semitic remarks about her. And finally, Kalenich was like, "You're making it really hard to be your lawyer. And you don't pay me." And Kalenich dropped Heimbach as a client in 2019 because Heimbach just stopped answering his calls.
Great. Smart people.
Yeah. So Matt Parrott, who's Matt Heimbach's father-in-law, but also the husband of the woman that he was sleeping with. This is complicated. There's a chart. Matt Heimbach and Matt Parrott, founders of the Traditionalist Worker Party, best friends for a long time, fuck each other's wives, big problems for them.
Yeah, the night of wrong wives.
The night of the wrong wives. So
yeah,
Matt Parrott was technically Matt Heimbach's father-in-law during the time period which Heimbach was fucking Parrott's wife.
Very classy people.
Not a great situation. So they lost their lawyer. Parrott very publicly told all Traditionalist Worker Party members to destroy evidence. So we knew that, right? That was on the record from the beginning that Matt Parrott was like, "Hey, everyone in TWP, if you did any crimes, delete it." Mm-hmm. Right? Delete your social media, delete your pictures. Like, we weren't there, right?
Yeah, and that's a crime.
That's a crime.
Yeah,
that's a crime.
That is a crime right there.
But an interesting thing that we learned today that I don't think we did know before, in November 2018, so they played a recording of a conversation between Matt Heimbach and Christopher Cantwell. And this was during examination of Heimbach. So Heimbach was on the stand, and they're talking about, like, you didn't produce discovery. You said you lost your phone, this, that, and the other. After you beat your wife, she threw away your phone. So he said, "I couldn't turn over my social media accounts because my wife deleted them because we had an argument about me taking out the trash," right? Like, we had this domestic dispute about the trash, and she deleted all my accounts, so I couldn't turn them over. Well, today we found out that he told Cantwell in 2018, so a year after the lawsuit was filed. So when a lawsuit is filed against you, you have a legal obligation to not do things like this. He told Cantwell that after a conversation with his lawyer, on the advice of his lawyer, he deleted those accounts.
Oh, great. So there's just a record of him criming. Yeah.
That's a crime?
Yeah.
And it's also a crime for his lawyer to have advised him to do that.
Great.
Again, there's no direct evidence who told him to do that, but we do have a recording of him saying a lawyer told him to. So that's not great. That's not a good situation.
Is he going to get charged with anything for that?
I am curious. I'm not a lawyer, just for everyone listening. I'm not a lawyer. I didn't go to law school. I didn't even finish undergrad. I'm not a lawyer. Mm-hmm. But I have listened to a lot of lawyers. But I am curious with what frequency can perjury charges be sought in a civil case, right?
Yeah.
It's still under oath. Like, it is still perjury. But how common is that to be pursued? Because they're perjuring.
Yeah, they're for sure perjuring.
They're perjuring.
They're just doing the thing the right always does, which is trust that the law will never actually come after them for their many crimes. And there's a good chance they'll be right.
God, like Heimbach said, when he was asked, have you ever provided security for Richard Spencer? And he said, no. And it's okay, well, there's like 100 pictures of you doing that at multiple events. They're claiming they don't know each other. Like, here's all these pictures of you guys hanging out. God, where else are we?
Yeah, I'm curious. One thing that kind of, especially because of the Rittenhouse thing, and we'll be talking to our mutual lawyer tomorrow about the Rittenhouse thing. Every cool person shares the same lawyer. But yeah, because of that, I'm kind of curious. What sense do you get of this judge?
There's no good judges. There's no good judges. But it could be worse,
I mean, I'm not saying but how is it?
It could be a lot worse. Trump appointed a shitload of federal judges pretty recently. Judge Moon is 85 years old. He's a Clinton appointee. So it could be worse.
Could be worse.
He's been on the bench, since I was in elementary school. And he's very old. And he doesn't, he's a little bit hard of hearing, but he's not stupid. And there's a lot of people who I think who are really frustrated with some of the things he's allowing to happen. He's really allowing these pro se defendants to sort of run roughshod over the procedure. But, like I said before we started recording, it's really hard to apply. I get like your sense of how things are supposed to work doesn't really apply in court, right? There's a very rigid, sort of outdated set of rules and procedures, and they don't feel right. They don't feel logical or reasonable or fair, but there is a specific way that it works, and it is hard to watch, especially if you've never seen it before. And because of the emotionally fraught nature of this, it's particularly frustrating to be listening on this line and saying, like, why are they allowed to do this to this witness? Well, legally, you can cross-examine your witnesses, even if you are the person who hurt them. It's not a good system, but it is how it works. But he's... And I also think there's concern about appellate issues. There's concern about mistrial. And so they're really going out of their way not to give anyone any excuse to say, well, this was not fair to me. They're going to say it anyway, but they're really letting them have a long leash in a way that feels very bad. But at the same time, I can kind of understand it.
Yeah.
I wish they hadn't done so much Holocaust denial, like on the record.
Yeah, that would be good.
They put an expert on today who's Dr. Deborah Lipstadt, who's an expert in Holocaust denial, to sort of talk about what the Holocaust is, I guess, in case the jury doesn't know.
God. Oh, that's bleak. Oh, Mom. That's fucking bleak.
Because they chose this jury based on them never having heard of Jews,
My God.
It's a bunch of like middle-aged people from Greene County who have never met a Jewish person. So they had to put on a professor to say, okay, when he says gas the K words, we're talking about gas chambers from the Holocaust. They didn't start out with gas chambers. They started with mass shootings, but it was too messy. I mean, she was literally recounting sort of the evolution from the Einsatzgruppen, shootings in the fields to the gas chambers. Like we had to talk all the way through it because it seems unnecessary. But again, for the jury, it might be necessary. And so when Azzmador, Robert Ray...
You don't want to take anything for granted, Yeah.
Right. And you really have to sort of lay out these connections, right? Because the idea is you have to prove a conspiracy, and you have to prove the conspiracy was racially motivated. And so when Azzmador is the racist wizard name that Robert Ray uses when he writes for the Daily Stormer, when Azzmador keeps saying, we're going to gas the K words, everyone knows what I mean when I say that, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. He keeps saying, the plan is to gas the K words, GTKRWN, gas the K words, race war now. He keeps saying, keeps saying it. And then the Torch March, he pepper sprays a bunch of people, which he is currently a fugitive of justice for. He's wanted for felonies in Albemarle County. He's missing. So he says he's going to do it, then he does it, and then afterwards he's on video saying, yeah, I gassed half a dozen K words. So you can see from A to B to C, and then we have this expert saying, okay, what he's saying is a direct reference to the Holocaust.
Yeah.
Right? It like you said, it's pretty open and shut. It's pretty straightforward, A to B to C. we have these Discord leaks. If you want to browse them, they're on Unicorn Riot. And almost immediately after the rally, Unicorn Riot had these Discord leaks. The entire server, the Charlottesville 2.0 server, where they planned this out, where they're in the Discord saying, yeah, it's going to be so great. We're going to do so much violence. We're going to hurt people. We're going to bring shields. We're going to bring base. Really explicitly talking about the plan, making jokes about hitting people with cars. Now, the entire Discord will be admitted. It has been authenticated. They received another copy of it via subpoena directly from Discord. It's real. It's evidence, as much as Cantwell doesn't like that. But more than that, we have, some first-person authentication. We heard deposition testimony from Elliot Klein's ex-girlfriend, the woman that he was living with in 2017. So in the summer of 2017, he was living with this woman that he had just met and had entered into a romantic relationship with. She has since left the movement. She has a lot of regret about her involvement in that time period. And, people have a lot of mixed feelings about what it means to leave the movement, what it means to atone. Is it possible to redeem yourself for having been a part of something like that? We don't have to litigate that.
No.
But we do have to.
Place, but yeah.
Well, we do have to recognize that her testimony is damning.
Yeah.
I mean, this is not Elliot Klein putting on a show in public. This is not Elliot Klein posturing for his friends. This is Eli at home in bed with his girlfriend talking about his fantasies of killing all the Jews. And her testimony was pretty harmful.
Yeah. You would think.
Yeah. It's not great. Really, you have to wonder how the jury is taking this, right? These people who have no concept or context
who
for this,
been
listening
living
to
and breathing this for years. Yeah.
Hours of this woman sort of near tears talking about how her boyfriend said that he was going to put her in a breeding camp once they had the ethno state. Not
Great.
Nice.
No.
really not nice stuff. And she also tested, we have the messages from the Discord where people are posting memes and jokes about hitting protesters. But Samantha testified that at private parties at Richard Spencer's house in the summer of 2017, these private parties with the organizers of the event at Richard Spencer's apartment, people explicitly discussed the legality of hitting people with their cars. This is not random people in the Discord that Richard could say, I don't know him, I never met him, I never posted in Discord. This is somebody sitting on your couch, Richard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Samantha said that during that time period, Klein was building an army for Richard. And Kessler texted Spencer something similar, right? That we'll build an army, my liege. Fucking dork-ass shit. But so one fun surprise from Samantha was that during that time period, Klein was, planning to provide his militia in the form of Identity Europa, right? These street troops he was going to provide to Spencer to build the movement. But that when the time came, he always knew that he would kill Richard to take control.
These people are all such fucking... It's a shame that what they actually are is deniable assets for the most dangerous folks, the fucking Bannon types.
Right.
Because if all of the fascists were this dumb, I wouldn't be so worried.
And it's hard. It's hard to walk the line between, really getting a kick out of some of these moments where it is genuinely funny, right? But then you remember, these people are very dangerous. These people are responsible for a death. These people... It's this emotional whiplash, right, of the plaintiffs getting on and saying, yes, my life was ruined. I still have nightmares. I still have to go to physical therapy. And then Cantwell getting up there and asking Heimbach if he's a federal agent.
Yeah.
Right? I think, so we've only seen one of the defendants on the stand so far, but I have a strong feeling Cantwell is going to use every opportunity that he has his frenemies under oath to ask them if they snitched on him.
Yeah. That's going to be pretty funny.
It's going to be great.
You got to laugh sometimes. Life's too hard.
But Cantwell is really using this. I think, he has nothing to lose, right? This is a case about damages. He has no money for them to take. He has $30,000 in credit card debt, and his car got repossessed once he went to prison. He has nothing for them to take. The only person he knows who did have anything is Ian Freeman, who's currently facing federal charges for some sort of complicated Bitcoin money laundering scam through a fake church. So he doesn't even have any friends to help him. That's an interesting case, but I don't have time for it now.
Yeah.
But he has nothing for them to take. He's already a felon. He can't have a gun anymore. I think he's just using this as an opportunity, as a platform to get his message out there and to harm the people he thinks harmed him. So every chance he gets, he's trying to force witnesses to dox people, right? He asked one of the plaintiffs, Devin Willis, another young man who was injured at the Torch March, a plaintiff in this case, he forced him to name the names of the non-parties who were also counter-demonstrating at the statue. These people's names have not been on the record. They, some
the
of
judge
them
made him do that?
Made him do that.
That's fucked up.
And, you could, if you were, I don't know, a complete baby-brained idiot, you could say, well, that maybe there was a legal reason that he needed those names. Mm-hmm. There's not. And we know there's not because he tried to do it again today. There was a non-party witness, a young woman who lived in one of the dorm rooms right by the rotunda. They're called the lawn rooms. It's a prestigious opportunity. Only super high achievers get to live in those beautiful historic lawn rooms. So she lived right near where the Torch March was happening, and she heard it, and she went outside and she looked at it. She's not a party to the suit. She has no knowledge of these people or what happened. She just saw this thing happen, and she testified to that. And he tried to, she had made some passing remark that she'd heard from another student that maybe there would be a thing on campus, right? That they knew about the rally the next day, but I don't know, maybe these guys will try and come here, just be on your toes, right? Not anything specific. She's not an activist. She didn't know anything, right? And so he grilled her. Tell me who told you that. Tell me who told you that. How did you know that? And he said on the record, direct quote, I want to know who infiltrated our communications. So he's trying to use this moment where he has someone under oath to extract information about who snitched. He wants to know who infiltrated their secret communications, which is him admitting there were secret communications that weren't turned over in discovery, which wasn't smart of him to do. But he's using this process to get names of people who he can harass. And we know that's what they're doing because while he was getting these names from that other witness, the names of the people at the statue, Jason Kessler, the lead defendant, right? The defendant whose name is on the lawsuit, the lead organizer of the rally, is posting all this time. He's posting through it. If you had a good lawyer, he would tell you not to post through your own conspiracy trial. So while Cantwell is extracting these names from this poor young man, Kessler's posting them. He's posting their pictures and their legal names and describing their involvement. These people who are not party to this lawsuit. And there's no way to interpret that other than as a vehicle for harassment. So I think there will be collateral damage of this lawsuit, but I hope that it does have the intended deterrent effect, right? Sorry, I've been talking at length for a while, but just in summation, I think inside the courtroom, this is a case about damages, right? The judge is very clear that stop talking about broader societal impact. You can't tell the jury about that. That's not relevant to this case. This, legally speaking, is a case about, did this thing happen? Were these people hurt by it? What is the dollar amount of their pain? Legally speaking, that's it. But outside the courtroom, this is about deterrence, right? This is about setting a precedent that if you do this, if you plan a rally knowing that the people who come to your rally will hurt people because you told them that's the goal, right? Mm-hmm. Even if you're not the one who swings the stick, even if you're not the one pressing the accelerator, you are responsible and you can be held accountable. Yeah. And that is an important message.
Yeah, we will, your life will be ruined if you participate in this shit.
Mm-hmm. That even if you don't have anything for us to take, we will put a garnishment on you that will follow you to the fucking grave.
Yep. And I think, that's I would agree what I think is important here. Molly, I think that's everything for now. We're still how much longer do we have to go through this? The court whatchamajig.
Well, it's scheduled for 4 weeks. It's been 1.5. Mm-hmm. So, and there was some anxiety and hand wringing about how maybe 4 weeks won't cut it.
Yeah, Jesus.
So,
well,
I'm regretting my decision to actively live tweet. So I'm transcribing in real time for 8 hours a day.
Everything that happens. Oh, your fingers. Are you using a laptop or are you doing it on a phone?
I'm doing it on a laptop, thank God. So because of COVID, no one can go into the courthouse because there's so many parties in this case and there's the plague and no one can go into the courthouse except for there's a press room where 15 people who got pre-approved by a federal court can go and sit and look at a monitor. Mm-hmm. But I'm sitting at home. I'm comfy at home.
Good.
So I'm using my
Thank
computer.
God. Okay.
Thank God.
Yeah, that would be a
And
nightmare.
I was disappointed. I kind of wanted.
Hi, this is Jo Winterstein, host of the Spirit Daughter podcast, where we talk about astrology, natal charts, and how to step into your most vibrant life. And I just sat down with a Minnie Driver.
The Irish traveller said when I was 16, you're going to have a terrible time with men.
Actor, storyteller, and unapologetic Aquarian visionary. Aquarius is all about freedom loving and different perspectives. And I find a lot of people with strong placements in Aquarius are misunderstood. A Sun and Venus in Aquarius in her 7th house spark her unconventional approach to partnership.
He really has taught me to embrace people sleeping in different rooms, on different houses, in different places, but just an embracing of the isness of it all.
If you're navigating your own transformation or just want a chart side view into how a leading artist integrates astrology, creativity, and real life, this episode is a must listen. Listen to the Spirit Daughter podcast starting on February 24th on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your podcasts.
I'm Clayton Eckerd, and in 2022, I was the lead of ABC's The Bachelor.
Unfortunately, it didn't go according to plan. He became the first Bachelor to ever have his final rose rejected. The internet turned on him.
If I could press a button and rewind it all, I would.
But what happened to Clayton after the show made even bigger headlines. It began as a one-night stand and ended in a courtroom, with Clayton at the center of a very strange paternity scandal.
The media is here. This case has gone viral.
The dating contract.
Agree to date me, but I'm also suing you.
Police search warrant.
This is unlike anything I've ever seen before.
I'm Stephanie Young. This is Love Trapped. This season, an epic battle of he said, she said, and the search for accountability in a sea of lies.
I have done nothing except get pregnant by the Bachelor!
Listen to Love Trapped on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
What if mind control is real?
If you could control the behavior of anybody around you, what kind of life would you have?
Can you hypnotically persuade someone to buy a car?
When you look at your car, you're going to become overwhelmed with such good feelings.
Can you hypnotize someone into sleeping with you?
I gave her some suggestions to be sexually aroused.
Can you get someone to join your cult?
NLP was used on me to access my subconscious.
NLP, aka Neuro-Linguistic Programming, is a blend of hypnosis, linguistics, and psychology. Fans say it's like finally getting a user manual for your brain.
It's about engineering consciousness.
Mind Games is the story of NLP. It's crazy cast of disciples and the fake doctor who invented it at a new age commune and sold it to guys in suits. He stood trial for murder and got acquitted. The biggest mind game of all? NLP might actually work.
This is wild.
Listen to Mind Games on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
1969. Malcolm and Martin are gone. America is in crisis. And at Morehouse College, the students make their move.
These students, including a young Samuel L. Jackson, locked up the members of the Board of Trustees, including Martin Luther King Sr. It's the true story of protest and rebellion in Black American history that you'll never forget. I'm Hans Charles.
I'm Menelik Lumumba.
Listen to The A Building on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
I love the courtroom ambiance. But I'll be honest, I'm way less worried.
Yeah.
I'm way less worried about getting stabbed here at home.
That is true. That is true. People are less likely to get stabbed at home, or more likely, one of the two. I don't know. Tell us in the comments where you think people are most likely to get stabbed. Molly, thank you so much. Thank you both for what you're doing and for coming on the show. Is there anywhere the listeners can find / support you? Would you like people to mail you knives?
What? Oh, mail me knives.
Yeah, but not as a threat, like as a fun thing. Fun knives for fun.
I did get a large machete in the mail the other day, and before I saw the little gift note, I was confused.
Oh, good. Okay, I'm glad you're getting gift machetes.
Yeah. My friend Shep is a sheep farmer in North Carolina. Sent me a large blade. Thanks, Shep.
Good.
No, but so if you're interested in reading moment by moment live transcription of people screaming Holocaust denial at a federal judge. You can check me out on Twitter. That's at SocialistDogMom. That's what happens when you make a little joke with your friends when you have 5 followers, and then you end up using it professionally.
Yeah,
that's
then you become national news repeatedly.
I know. Then people are posting your mugshot, making fun of your username.
I know. Your bullshit mugshot. You look great, but
I look fine.
It's bullshit.
Nobody looks good after they get left in a hot van like a dog.
Yeah,
but
that's true. Well, Molly, that's going to be the end of the episode. So
it is.
Why don't we sing a song and roll out?
Hopefully not the song that Heimbach included in his Christmas letter to James Fields in prison.
Oh, God, that must have been really special. Geez, I'll have to look that up. I did come across in my my browsing through Fascist Telegram the other week an entire album, dozens of songs that were all Nazi covers of Blink-182's entire discography. Everything. And they called it, of course, Blink 1488. Like,
of course they did.
Of course they did. It was. I don't even know. Like, I don't even know like how to talk about that. It was just a thing that I found.
Do you know Hampton Stahl, the guy who studies militia stuff?
Oh yeah.
He's got a particular fascination with white power rap.
Oh God, yeah, it's never any good. Although there is a fun in one of the H Bomber Guy videos. He finds this flat Earth Nazi who has a rap that's amazing. All right,
I'm partial to Cantwell's diss tracks.
Yeah, God, Chris Cantwell. Well, thank you, Molly, and off we go into the wild blue yonder.
I'm going to go smoke some legal weed and fall asleep face down, hopefully not thinking about this trial.
I am not going to smoke some legal weed because that's federally a crime, Molly. All right. Have a good day, Molly. Thank you all for listening.
When P.T. Barnum's Great American Museum burned to the ground in 1865, what rose from its ashes would change the world. Welcome to Grim and Mild Presents, an ongoing journey into the strange, the unusual, and the fascinating. For our inaugural season, we'll be giving you a backstage tour of the always complex and often misunderstood cultural artifact that is the American Sideshow. So come along as we visit the shadowy corners of the stage and learn about the people who were at the center of it all. In a place where spectacle was king, we will soon discover there's always more to the story than meets the eye. So step right up and get in line. Listen to Grim and Mild Presents now on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Learn more over at grimandmild.com/presents.
Executive producer Paris Hilton brings back the hit podcast, How Men Think. And that's good news for anyone that is confused by men, which is basically everyone. Get an inside look at what goes on in the mind of men from the men themselves. It's real talk, straight from the source.
The How Men Think podcast is exactly what we need to figure them out. It's going to be fun, informative, and probably a bit scary at times, because we're literally going inside the minds of men.
As much as we like to think all men are the same, they're actually very different. Each week, a celebrity guest host provides honest advice in his area of expertise.
When I agreed to do this reboot, I had a few conditions. No sugarcoating, no mind games, and absolutely no mansplaining. Men are hard enough to understand without the mind games.
Listen to How Men Think on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
What's up, guys? I'm Rashad Bilal.
And I am Troy Millings, and we are the hosts of the Earn Your Leisure podcast, where we break down business models and examine the latest trends in finance. We hold court and have exclusive interviews with some of the biggest names in business, sport, and entertainment. From DJ Khaled to Mark Cuban, Rick Ross, and Shaquille O'Neal. I mean, our alumni list is expansive. Listen in as our guests reveal their business models, hardships, and triumphs in their respective fields. The knowledge is in depth, and the questions are always delivered from your standpoint. We want to know what you want to know.
We talk to the legends of business, sports, and entertainment about how they got their start and, most importantly, how they make their money. Earn Your Leisure is a college business class mixed with pop culture.
Want to learn about the real estate game? Unclear as how the stock market works? We got you. Interested in starting a trucking company or a vending machine business? Not really sure about how taxes or credit work? We got it all covered. The Earn Your Leisure podcast is available now. Listen to Earn Your Leisure on the Black Effect Podcast Network, iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome back to It Could Happen Here, the podcast that is occasionally introduced competently, as it sort of was today, because our guest today is someone who is very near and dear to me and to, like, almost every other person that I know and work with. Moira Meltzer-Cohen. Moira, you are a lawyer focusing on civil rights and movement kind of cases, and you are the lawyer of, like everybody I respect in the world. Yeah, you're the person that I text whenever I need to know, hey, was this a crime? Or
it never is,
and it never is. I'm law-abiding, very law-abiding, and we wanted to have you on. Both because you're always a breath of sunshine and because there's some like law stuff happening these days. We just had our mutual friend Molly Conger on to talk about the Charlottesville case, which is quite a thing. Today was the day.
Yeah, today had some moments.
Chris Cantwell and Richard Spencer representing themselves separately, each cross-examining each other.
I have so many thoughts. But mostly my thoughts involve laughing.
Yeah. It's very, very funny. It's the funniest of an incredibly tragic and infuriating situation. Something funny finally happened. So at least there's that.
He's often very funny in spite of himself.
Yeah. I would love one day to just get you on and we can do a reading of some of Chris Cantwell's better legal filings. Because he's got quite the legal mind.
Robert, I think I maybe didn't ever tell you about the fact that we did a Purim spiel, which is a performance of the story of Esther.
Oh my God.
Traditionally done at Purim, which is a Jewish holiday.
Mm-hmm.
And it was based on the complaint that he filed.
Oh my God.
For
those of you
Woodard III was prominently featured in the role of Haman.
For those of you who don't know, Chris Cantwell, the crying Nazi from the Unite the Right rally, has been incarcerated for a year or so now, and continues to put out his own legal motions, generally handwritten, alleging all kinds of conspiracies from the people who did not call the FBI and admit to committing several crimes.
Yeah, we should absolutely do a crossover with Daniel Harper and Moira to discuss Cantwell's legal genius.
But today, Moira, we wanted to have you on because there is another case that a lot of folks are rightly concerned about because it has some pretty dire implications depending on how it goes in a number of ways. The trial of Kyle Rittenhouse. Everyone knows Kyle Rittenhouse took a gun illegally across state lines to a protest so he might have the chance to shoot people, and then shot people. This is my opinion about what happened. Obviously, the legal case is unfolding. There's been a lot of talk online, on Twitter and whatnot, about how obviously unfair the judge is being. This is what the talk on Twitter is about. And it's because of a couple of things. One is that the judge, and again, before I go to you, Moira, I'm just explaining kind of the way the discourse has been. The discourse is stated like, well, the judge said you can't call the people that he killed victims, but you can call the people that he killed looters and arsonists. And so people are saying, look at this very clear example of how bad the justice system is. And I wanted to bring you on for a number of reasons, including the fact that, like, there's a lot of stuff that seems fucked up and in fact is fucked up, you could argue, but is also like pretty normal justice system stuff, and some stuff that seems fucked up but actually isn't. I'm not necessarily talking about the Rittenhouse case here, just in general when we talk about the law. So I guess I wanted to have you on to explain to us what's happening in your opinion, and how normal, abnormal, good, bad are kind of the things that we're seeing, the decisions we're seeing this judge make in this case so far.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. So the trial, I think when you asked me to comment on this, the trial had not started. The trial has now started. It has been characterized by the defense saying the N-word, a juror being
Hard R.
The juror this morning, I think, was dismissed for making a cruel and nakedly racist joke. And apparently the judge had a fit of pique about the media's response to his evidentiary rulings, which are what you've asked me to come discuss, which is itself actually one of the more unusual things about this, how this trial is going. It's always a little bit hard for me to opine on a case that is not my case. I feel tentative about it. This would never be my case because I would not represent a white supremacist, and I am not a prosecutor and would never be a prosecutor. And I was not able to look at the briefing because although all of the briefing was ostensibly publicly filed, it is not actually publicly available. I had a very interesting conversation with the clerk of court in Kenosha who told me that if I mailed her a request, she would fax me the briefing at $1.25 a page. And I said, thank you very much. Goodbye. So I'll do my best to speak to these rulings and the sort of larger issues as I see them. As you noted, there have been a lot of kind of salacious headlines about the evidentiary rulings in this case. And I think those headlines are really, they're less about what's actually happening in the case, and they're more reflective of the sort of pearl-clutching liberal impulse to notice the totally self-evident hypocrisy of the legal system, and then to conclude that because certain groups are shown more leniency, the way to resolve this hypocrisy is to make sure everyone is policed and prosecuted and punished as viciously as the left is, which is not actually the goal that I have. And just to clarify, when I talk about liberals, as I will probably do a little bit, I don't mean I mean liberal as opposed to radical, people who are more or less okay with the underlying big systems like capitalism and white supremacy and heteropatriarchy, and maybe are more concerned with the iterations of those things that are particularly gauche, but they don't actually mind the systems themselves or the way that those systems are reiterated and enforced by, for example, the American criminal legal system. So, I think the kind of liberal read on these rulings is not only not legally sound, I think it's actually incredibly dangerous. And it's watching this unfold and watching the liberal commentary on it, I think is one of the things, it's one of the ways that I can really see liberals and liberalism losing credibility, because they're sort of calling out this hypocrisy, and at the same time, there's a little bit of a double standard that they want to propose and enforce. So I'll talk about the rulings that you discussed. The first one is that the judge said that the prosecution is not allowed to refer to the people at Rittenhouse killed as victims. I will remind you, as I remind all of my clients continuously, that the law is at best adjacent to common sense understandings of justice and even, frankly, common sense understandings of reality. Obviously, the people that Kyle Rittenhouse killed were victims. But as my beloved colleague Sandy reminded me, the concept of victimhood, the status of victimhood, is among the things that needs to be proven beyond a reasonable doubt at this trial.
Yeah.
Right. And so in fact, this is a totally straightforward ruling.
Yeah.
It is a ruling that I would argue for as a defense attorney, and that I would expect to win were I trying a murder case. So,
it's one of those things, like, you have to overcome this you have to overcome when you're thinking about a trial, like the fact that you know he's guilty, because the point of a trial is that everyone, like, there's a process, right? We don't just do street justice, because that's what Rittenhouse did. Like you have to, like, it is troubling to me the extent that people are like, well, he should be presumed, like, we should be referring to the people he shot as victims before he has been adjudicated as guilty, because, like, that's important. Like, the presumption of innocence matters, and it's also something that's very unfair. Like, there's a person in Portland, Alexander Dial, who got in trouble for taking a hammer out of a Nazi's hand during a rally, and has been charged with several felonies. And because his trial kept getting delayed, spent 2.5 years under pretrial conditions. So the presumption of innocence is hardly equal, but it is important.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that, you know, we'll talk about this, I think, in a little bit, but that's exactly the issue, right? Is that we need to be enforcing the equal application of the presumption of innocence, not being, you know, rabidly going after the right in the same way that we are used to law enforcement and the judiciary going after the left. The other ruling that the judge made, which you mentioned, was that he said that the defense is authorized to characterize the people that Rittenhouse killed as looters or rioters if there is evidence presented that they were in fact looting and or rioting.
Yeah.
I would, if I were, you know, in this case, which of course I'm not, I would object to this on the grounds that it is prejudicial and bullshit. And
it's fucked up and bullshit. Yeah.
Yes. That said, I am not super surprised by that ruling. I would say it's likely within the sound discretion of the judge. And if, you know, and if the prosecution disagrees, it's a matter for appeal. You know, I think one of the things the judge said about this, actually, that I think is really important and correct, is that he has a tremendous amount of discretion in making evidentiary rulings. One of the rulings he made was that he's admitting the testimony of an expert witness, which, you know, I think a lot of people are also quite upset about. But that said, again, this is not that unusual, and it's very difficult for him to deny that motion to have his evidence or his testimony admitted, because the prosecution routinely uses use of force experts in similar trials.
Yeah.
So now they're just on the other side of the table.
Yeah.
So, you know, first of all, I get that these rulings don't make us feel good, but they aren't that strange. And as I said, the judge has tremendous discretion in these matters. I was thinking about how to illustrate this, and it occurred to me that I think the last time I was on one of your podcasts, you asked me whether cocaine was illegal.
Yeah. Where are we landing on that, by the way?
So I think the first time you asked me, I was a total killjoy and was like, of course it's illegal, Robert. But if I'd actually taken your question more seriously, I think a better answer probably would have been, nobody knows. For precisely this reason, because the real question is not what the law says. The real question is how or whether or against whom or to what degree and under what circumstances will that law be enforced. And these are always open questions and arguments, and judges have a ton of power. This case is no exception. So, you know, again, not only are these rulings pretty standard, but they're, I think, within the judge's discretion. Some of them I really disliked. Some of them make total sense to me. And I think that what is happening is not necessarily sound legal analysis, but liberals sort of trying to argue that Rittenhouse should be more harshly prosecuted by saying that these specific rulings are unfair or unusual.
It's a little bit like the liberals crying out now because people are putting, like, "Let's go Brandon" on, printing it on rifle receivers and saying, like, well, the Secret Service should investigate. Well, if they do that, then like 30 if they do that and like one company gets a fine, 40 people are going to go to prison for having red flags on their body armor. Like that's the way it works in this country. The right thing. Yeah.
Any anarchist with a 3D printer is going to immediately go to jail.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's not like.
That is correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess the thing that I want to point out here is that what is actually unusual about this case is not these rulings. It is that Rittenhouse is going to trial at all. Mm-hmm. And the reason Rittenhouse is going to trial, is able to go to trial, is largely because this prosecution is fundamentally calculated not to be repressive. So I want to kind of zoom out and get away from the weeds of these evidentiary rulings. So in its simplest expression, when we talk about the difference between state and federal jurisdiction, we're saying kind of jurisdiction for dummies, overly simplified, is stuff that happens inside or only impacts a given state is typically prosecuted by the state. And if your offense conduct or alleged offense conduct impacts more than one state, then it is or can be prosecuted by the Federal Department of Justice. So Kyle Rittenhouse crossed state lines with a pretty serious firearm, and he shot 3 people. This puts us immediately into federal jurisdiction land. He did this in the context of an uprising for racial justice that has been characterized by the fact that those rising up on the side of racial justice have been subject to intense repression by the federal government. DOJ has shown themselves to be fire-breathingly enthusiastic about exercising their jurisdiction over petty offenses based on totally tenuous grounds for people on the left or who are perceived to be on the left. DOJ has asserted jurisdiction in order to prosecute people for absolutely trivial but politically motivated offenses that would be left to the state to prosecute absent the politics of the accused. They have asserted federal jurisdiction on really flimsy bases, like that a local police building or vehicle belongs to a department that has received federal funding, so property damage against it becomes a federal offense. One thing they're doing that is unusual is the federal government is asserting concurrent jurisdiction to prosecute offenses. So I know there's someone in Portland who is simultaneously being prosecuted by Multnomah and also the federal government for allegedly throwing some accelerant on a police building. Right. So it is very curious that Rittenhouse, who quite clearly did something that would, fall under federal jurisdiction, is not being federally charged. And it matters a lot for how the case proceeds. Because the way that federal prosecutions operate is that the feds will typically stack these indictments in a way that really puts tremendous pressure on them to plead guilty, which is not typically the case, or doesn't happen in the same way in a state prosecution. So you have these stacked indictments with multiple counts, ranging, all kinds of conduct, often involving, a conspiracy, which can be very, very easy to prove. And a guilty finding on any of those counts could be like a mandatory minimum of 5 to 10 years. And then if you're looking at, a guilty on more than one or all of those counts, you're looking at a sentence, potentially concurrent sentences that are tantamount to dying in prison, right? And so this creates tremendous pressure on federal defendants to negotiate a pretrial disposition, to take a guilty plea. So again, Kyle Rittenhouse crosses state lines with this firearm, which gets used in the commission of an act of violence. And I feel extremely confident that any federal prosecutor could come up with a stack of counts against him within about 10 minutes without breaking a sweat. But, so, if you think about him being in that position, you think through, okay, if I go to trial, what are likely outcomes? if Kyle Rittenhouse went to trial federally, and even if he prevailed on a self-defense, right, which could happen, if he were found guilty on one or more of the lesser charges, he would still be looking at really, really serious time. Mm-hmm. Right. But that's not where we are. Right. We are in a really weird place where, like, in a federal context, we wouldn't even be like talking about evidentiary rulings because he would almost certainly not be going to trial. Right. Like,
it would be a plea sort of deal. Yeah.
Or, if he had a reasonable lawyer, he would probably be negotiating a plea.
I'm curious, what do you think about, because one argument I've heard, and I'm certainly in no position to evaluate this personally, is that if federal charges had been placed on him, when the crime, in 2020, Trump would have pardoned him. Like, I don't know. Yeah. Like, I've heard people argue that like, well, at least with the state charges, he can't be pardoned by President Trump. Like, I'm in no position to really evaluate that, but I'm curious what you think about that.
I honestly can't even speculate about what might have happened. That is very interesting. I do think that if DOJ wanted to charge him at this point, I mean,
they still could, right?
But like, there, I think, was an opening for that to happen after Trump left. Yeah. I suspect there is a very interesting FOIA request to be made to DOJ to see what kind of memo was circulated about whether or not they were going to pick this one up. They clearly declined to prosecute. The only thing that I could come up with, to be honest, and I looked and did not really see any meaningful discussion of this, of their decision not to prosecute. The only thing that occurred to me is that they might have been reluctant to assert jurisdiction over a minor, but they can prosecute anyone over the age of 15 as an adult if they engage in violent crimes, or if they are alleged to have engaged in violent crimes. So that's not, it wouldn't entirely undermine their ability to do so. For whatever reason, for whatever reason they didn't, I think it is worth noting. I think it is, as I said, very curious. And it's particularly curious in light of the intense federal repression that has been faced by people perceived to be on the left.
Yeah, absolutely.
So like, again, I want to be very clear. I'm not suggesting that I want him to be federally prosecuted. I don't particularly. I'm not interested in arguing for more prosecutions or for making the state the arbiter of political righteousness, or giving the state more enforcement power or more resources. And look, no shade to Kenosha, Wisconsin. All right. But one of the things that federal prosecutors really have a lot of experience doing is digital forensic investigations. And in this case, one of the sort of critical questions is, did he have specific intent to go across state lines and engage in violence? And I suspect that if you were to access all of his texts and metadata and social media posts, that you could probably find evidence of that specific intent. And I think that the federal government is probably better positioned to do that than the prosecutors in Kenosha. And they decided not to, right? So, and that is exactly the kind of investigation that they mounted against Daniel Baker, he's the yoga teacher in Tallahassee who just got 3.5 years for posting vague, sort of incoherent, mutually contradictory, kind of not at all frightening.
Yeah, it's not, I wouldn't recommend. They were
characterized as threats, but I hesitate to repeat that. He posted some stuff on social media, and now he's going to do 3.5 years in federal prison.
Yeah, my attitude on the nature of what he posts is that, like, if prior to his prosecution you had brought that post to me, I said, well, probably not a great idea to post, but also literally every week, a right-winger in the Portland area posts something significantly more actionable. Right now, Chandler Pappas, currently being charged with assaulting 6 police officers in the state capitol in Salem, just announced that he's doing armed training as a convicted felon outside of Portland later this November, which if he touches a firearm, he should go away to, like, based on the letter of the law, he should go to prison for years. Like, that's the way the law is written. Nothing's going to happen to him. He's going to get to train people with guns and continue to carry guns, and it's fine for him. Anyway, whatever. I'm sorry.
It's okay. I guess your listeners can't see that I have my head in my hands.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, look, what Daniel Baker did was certainly ill-advised.
Ill-advised is how I would characterize it.
Yeah. I have clients who have been visited by the Secret Service or have been visited by the FBI for saying stuff that when they call me and they're like, well, I just said this. And I'm like, yeah, I know that you're not going to actually do that, but maybe don't. It's ill-advised.
Yeah,
it's not ill-advised. It's ill-advised, but it's protected by the very First Amendment. Mm-hmm. More or less. And, I've said this before. I don't think the solution to being surveilled on social media is self-censorship. I think it is courage, but I also think that discretion is the better part of valor. So
yes, pick your battles and maybe, understand that it's not fair,
And also, like, what do you gain by, being bumptious on the internet?
No. And it's one of those things where, if that guy had a high dollar lawyer, if he'd been a rich person, maybe he would have gotten away with it. Who knows? But like he certainly would have gotten. I can certainly say he would have gotten away with it if he'd been a right winger, because a bunch of them do every single day.
I can't make any speculation about that particular case, but I can say that the people who are being surveilled intensely and targeted for that kind of repression are not the people on the right. The people on the right are able to make those kinds of statements and not be particularly taken seriously, even when they should be. And people on the left are presumed to be, Antifa super soldiers. Mm-hmm. I think the decision not to assert federal jurisdiction in the Rittenhouse case is interesting. It is noteworthy.
Yeah.
I'm really curious about what was going on there. And it has had a sort of cascade of effects, including, I doubt that the forensic digital investigation was as good as it would have been had it been federal. And I doubt that he's facing multiple charges, but I don't think that he would have been as likely to go to trial had he been federally charged. So again, I don't, this is not an argument for more federal prosecution.
Yeah, of course.
But I think the breathless outrage that we're seeing in, these headlines, where people are correctly identifying the hypocrisy of the criminal legal system. Mm-hmm. I think it's sort of an exercise in point missing. This prosecution, like many of the prosecutions that we see, or the prosecutions that don't happen at all, that involve members of the dominant class or people who uphold the values of the dominant classes, is sort of proof of concept that it's possible to effectively allocate the burden of proof to the prosecution. It's possible not to go super hard on people and punish them for exercising their trial right. Right? I mean, it's possible to treat all people accused of offenses in this way. And I would much rather, obviously my ultimate goal is to dismantle the entire system, but in the meantime, I don't think what we need is more vicious prosecution of the right. I think we need consistent and commensurate prosecution or lack of prosecution. We need I think that seeing the way that the right is treated should be evidence for and an argument for the possibility of treating all people with more leniency, rather than, the intense federal repression that we are facing and have been facing, since the Palmer raids. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, Moira, that is the stuff I wanted to ask about. Is there anything else that?
I mean, sure. I definitely want to go off on liberals some more.
Please. Please. I mean, Garrison is a huge fan of liberals. He's got actually a full back tattoo of Barack Obama and Bill Clinton, but they're in the volleyball scene from Top Gun. It's an incredible tattoo. He did it all freehand on his own back. Amazing.
This is like the Garrison.
I hope I don't receive any
Stones Nixon tattoo.
I hope I don't receive any awful fan art now. Oh no!
Someone do it. Come on.
God.
Photoshop Garrison's head onto Roger Stone's back, and Photoshop Nixon's head out, and the volleyball scene from Top Gun with Bill Clinton and Barack Obama. Do it. Someone's gonna do it, Gar.
This is workplace abuse.
Somebody is definitely gonna do it.
You could sue me for this, and you'd be right to do so. But. Let's get back to liberals.
And I might represent you.
Trial of the century. Yeah, that sounds great.
I think this is a trend that we see with people who are not necessarily focused on looking at the ways that the law is always going to be used first and worst against the already most vulnerable, right? So we've seen things like, I think there's just this very well documented liberal impulse, and I think it's very well intentioned, but it's very dangerous to do things, to like assume that the system somehow works or should work, and that it just needs to be like followed more closely.
Yeah.
And that if we push for things like, if we like use the law to constrain things that I would agree are the most harmful excesses of bigotry, right?
Yeah.
That the law would be a good tool for addressing violence and bigotry.
Yeah.
And the law does not, that is not what kind of tool the law is. When we push for things like laws regulating political speech, including so-called hate speech, laws regulating what are referred to as hate crimes, laws regulating who can carry a firearm and what they might look like, pushes for limiting the places or circumstances under which you could protest or demonstrate, right? Which was done. There was a real big push to forbid anti-choice activists from protesting outside of clinics, right? Which I understand, right? But what actually is the upshot of doing that? When we see this kind of push to use the law as a tool to enforce a particular political agenda, it is not. It's just a very ill-conceived way to approach this, because the law is never going to protect the most vulnerable. These structures of power that uphold it remain in place, and so it's just always going to be leveraged against the people who have the least amount of power. This sort of response to the Rittenhouse stuff to me is just essentially a recuperation of that impulse.
Yeah. I mean, it's a little like that old, I think the joke is attributed to Gandhi. I don't know if Gandhi actually said it, but like he was asked, what do you think of Christian civilization? And he said, I think it would be a wonderful idea. What do you think of the fair and equal rule of law? Sounds nice. Yeah. But
it was either
I've
Gandhi or Groucho Marx.
Yeah, one of the two. Maybe both. I don't know that we ever saw them together. All right. So I don't know. It's obviously it's too early to. It's one of those things where all of the complaining about the unfairness of the trial of Rittenhouse winds up getting rammed into a legal wall. Metaphorically, it may seem silly in context or in retrospect, or this may be the thing that ignites a new wave of vigilantes showing up at protests with guns because he proves to be untouchable. Like, really,
But the big fear is that this will set a precedent that will allow other people to use quote-unquote self-defense claims in effort just to kill black activists, to kill activists on the left, to kill people wearing, black hoodies and bandanas, right?
Yeah,
that's the big fear out of this situation.
Because my expectation is that if Rittenhouse gets off, or even just gets very minor, like if he's out of jail quickly, within about 6 months, he's going to be a millionaire.
Absolutely.
That's the way the right wing works.
I would gently ask you to think about what happens if he doesn't, because if he's convicted, we are going to see a deepening of the repression that is faced by everyone on the left as well. We lose either way.
Yeah.
I mean, no good choices on the table.
There's no winning. I think part of it, I guess, depends on what he's convicted for. Because some of the stuff it seems to me some of the things he's charged with, if convicted, there's more potential negative implications across the political aisle than with others. Mm-hmm. Like if it's ruled murder, I don't know, that feels less worrisome. I mean, I have some concerns about the crossing state lines stuff. I don't know. I mean, none of it's good. I guess where I am is I remember vividly how much the situation on the ground changed after Kenosha, just in Portland even. I mean, Garrison can back me up with this. They were there for that too. Like it was a significant shift in the feeling of deadliness, whenever there was a right-wing, left-wing confrontation.
And someone died a few days later.
Someone died a few days later in a fucking gunfight. And I don't know, Moira. I don't know. I don't want Rittenhouse to get off scot-free for shooting 3 people. You're absolutely right. There's no winning with the legal system.
The only way to win is not to play.
The only way to win is not to play. So form your own breakaway civilization. Yeah, escape.
And also Gandhi.
And Gandhi. Yeah. And L. Ron Hubbard. Take to the sea.
Yes.
Yeah.
Always. Look, I don't think I'm not looking for him to prevail on the self-defense.
Yeah.
I'm not none of this is going to make me feel good.
Right.
But I think that whether or not he is punished, whether or not he is convicted, there will be negative repercussions. And all of those negative consequences will redound to the detriment of the people who are already facing the most intense federal repression.
Yeah, that is, and in fairness, like, this is the case of a child who killed 2 people and is now, we are determining whether or not this child will spend the rest of their life in a cell. None of this should make anyone feel good, no matter what happens. It's a thoroughly bleak story.
Tragic because this kid is never going to have a chance to grow up and be like, oh, I was being like a horrible person.
They'll never be able to adjust to anything else rather than being this person that culturally has been created, right? They are like a cultural thing. They are an item. They're not a person anymore. Yeah. And they'll never be able to escape that.
Yeah, I was a piece of shit when I was 17, and if I'd had access to an AR-15 and a chance to feel like a hero, I might have done something horrific too.
And instead, you were just doing sloppy steaks. And it's fine.
Yeah, and now it's fine. Have you watched I Think You Should Leave, Moira?
I'm sorry?
Have you watched I Think You Should Leave, Moira?
No.
Oh, it's good. It's good.
Okay. All right. I'll check it out. I'll take a look.
Yeah, I don't know. Well, thank you, Moira. This is always appreciated. It's
Very
good
welcome.
I don't know, like, we've talked a bit about anarchism. How much of like your belief about the way the world ought to be and is came as a result of getting into the guts of the legal system?
You mean did I become more devoted to anarchism when I went to law school?
Yeah.
I didn't become less devoted to it. Look, I remember when I was going to law school, people kept saying, oh, you're going to become really conservative. And I was like, I don't think that's true. That seems fake. And in fact, I remember being in my criminal procedure class and just thinking, how in the world can anyone at any law school read Miranda, which is a case.
Hi, this is Jo Winterstein, host of the Spirit Daughter podcast, where we talk about astrology, natal charts, and how to step into your most vibrant life. And I just sat down with Minnie Driver.
The Irish traveler said when I was 16, you're going to have a terrible time with men.
Actor, storyteller, and unapologetic Aquarian visionary. Aquarius is all about freedom-loving and different perspectives, and I find a lot of people with strong placements in Aquarius are misunderstood. A Sun and Venus in Aquarius in her 7th house spark her unconventional approach to partnership.
He really has taught me to embrace people sleeping in different rooms, on different houses, in different places, but just an embracing of the isness of it all.
If you're navigating your own transformation or just want a chart-side view into how a leading artist integrates astrology, creativity, and real life, this episode is a must listen. Listen to the Spirit Daughter podcast starting on February 24th on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your podcasts.
I'm Clayton Echard, and in 2022, I was the lead of ABC's The Bachelor.
Unfortunately, it didn't go according to plan. He became the first Bachelor to ever have his final rose rejected. The internet turned on him.
If I could press a button and rewind it all, I would.
But what happened to Clayton after the show made even bigger headlines. It began as a one-night stand and ended in a courtroom, with Clayton at the center of a very strange paternity scandal.
The media is here. This case has gone viral.
The dating contract.
Agree to date me, but I'm also suing you.
Please search warrant.
This is unlike anything I've ever seen before.
I'm Stephanie Young. This is Love Trapped. This season, an epic battle of he said, she said, and the search for accountability in a sea of lies.
I have done nothing except get pregnant by the Bachelor!
Listen to Love Trapped on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
What if mind control is real?
If you could control the behavior of anybody around you, what kind of life would you have?
Can you hypnotically persuade someone to buy a car?
When you look at your car, you're going to become overwhelmed with such good feelings.
Can you hypnotize someone into sleeping with you?
I gave her some suggestions to be sexually aroused.
Can you get someone to join your cult?
NLP was used on me to access my subconscious.
NLP, aka Neuro-Linguistic Programming, is a blend of hypnosis, linguistics, and psychology. Fans say it's like finally getting a user manual for your brain.
It's about engineering consciousness.
Mind Games is the story of NLP. Its crazy cast of disciples and the fake doctor who invented it at a New Age commune and sold it to guys in suits. He stood trial for murder and got acquitted. The biggest mind game of all? NLP might actually work.
This is wild.
Listen to Mind Games on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
1969. Malcolm and Martin are gone. America is in crisis. And at Morehouse College, the students make their move.
These students, including a young Samuel L. Jackson, locked up the members of the Board of Trustees, including Martin Luther King Sr. It's the true story of protest and rebellion in Black American history that you'll never forget. I'm Hans Charles.
I'm Menelik Lumumba.
Listen to The A Building on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Where someone is, just horrifically abused by police in order to extract a statement. How could anybody read this case and not come out of law school with a deep contempt for law enforcement? I know that it happens. I don't know how.
Yeah.
Always uplifting.
Yeah. I mean, it's important to know, when I was younger and poor, and dealing with things like taxes. I would often go like years without paying them, and I would like ignore debts and bills until like my student loans, until it became like a serious problem, because I didn't want to look at it. I didn't even want to like look at the scale of the issue and grapple with it. I just wanted to run away from it. And when I actually like sat down and figured out my situation and like really came to understand like what I needed to do in order to deal with those problems, like it was stressful and it sucked and it was fucking days of work. But understanding the scope of the problem I'd gotten myself into was a necessary step to like fixing the situation. Yes. And I think the same is true with like this kind of shit. It's not fun. Nobody who is, I think, a reasonable person like wants to dig into the U.S. justice system and get into the guts of it because it's bleak as hell. But you need to, because it's you can't escape it unless you flee the country and live in a place with no extradition treaties, or international waters.
I feel like you're talking about a lot of the people you've profiled.
Yeah.
In your other podcast.
I mean, Ecuador does sound nice.
I'm sure it's lovely this time of year.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think you're right. We need to be able to have a sort of clear-eyed assessment so that we can accurately identify and effectively address the problems. Unfortunately, I think the problems are so all-encompassing that I don't know that I would venture to say that there is not a real totalizing solution that doesn't involve total abolition.
Yeah, I agree with you. Abolition.
But in the meantime, I mean, I think there are things that we can do to advocate for our clients or
and
my clients, I guess.
As an individual, you can do to protect yourself. And that's why it is important to have some sort of working understanding, because you can keep yourself and the people around you at least somewhat safer if you do understand the beast. Even though your goal is to destroy it, and that's I think the only reasonable goal when you really understand it. It still behooves you to understand it. I mean, it's the same with what Garrison and I do with the fucking Nazis, spending all this time in weird Telegram channels, like reading what they're trying to understand them, because you do need to understand them to effectively combat them.
Well, it's not for the faint of heart.
No.
I mean, what we're doing.
Neither is what you do.
The message is that we're all well adjusted and we're all doing great.
We're all doing great.
We're saving up for that boat.
Nobody has any secondary trauma.
No. There's no secondary trauma in international waters, Moira. I have that. My old friend LRH told me that.
Just you and the open sea,
and a bunch of 20-year-olds searching for gold that I buried in a past life.
That
Living
does
the
sound
dream.
fun.
Yeah.
He is both fascinating and terrifying.
Yeah.
Just like our legal system.
Just like our legal system.
And that wraps up this episode.
Yeah, that brings us around. Moira, do you have anything you want to plug? Any place maybe our listeners could send donations that would help somebody who's throwing themselves against a wall at the moment?
Would certainly suggest that people look into whatever bail funds are local to them. There's one I know in New York called COVID Bailout NYC that's doing incredible work right now to get people off Rikers Island, which is having a humanitarian crisis of just unbelievable scope. It sounds to me like the conditions on Rikers right now are at least as bad as the conditions that led to the Attica uprising.
Jesus.
So I would always direct people to give money to local bail funds. I also want to plug the National Lawyers Guild Anti-Federal Repression or Federal Defense Hotline, which is 212-679-2811. 212-679-2811. If you call that number, or you can call that number if you are having unwanted contact with federal agents, and you can be advised by an attorney, who is me, about your rights and responsibilities with respect to federal agents, and I will try to connect you with appropriate resources in your area. This is not the hotline to call if you've been injured by a police officer. This is the hotline to call if you have been visited by the FBI. Don't talk to cops. If you are contacted by law enforcement, say, I am represented by counsel. Please leave your name and number and my lawyer will call you. And remember that you cannot talk your way out of an arrest, but you can talk your way into a conviction.
All great points, all great things to be aware of. Speaking of great things to be aware of, be aware that we'll be back tomorrow, unless this is a Friday, in which case we'll be back next week from now until the heat death of the universe. Thank you so much, Maura.
You're so welcome.
Adoption of teens from foster care is a topic not enough people know about, and we're here to change that. I'm April Dinwiddie, host of the new podcast, Navigating Adoption, presented by Adopt US Kids. Each episode brings you compelling real-life adoption stories told by the families that live them with commentary from experts. Visit adoptuskids.org/podcast or subscribe to Navigating Adoption, presented by Adopt US Kids. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services Administration for Children and Families and the Ad Council.
Make sure to check out Drink Champs, your #1 music podcast on the Black Effect Podcast Network. Hosts NORE and DJ EFN sat down with artist and icon Ye, which Vulture called one of 2021's most significant interviews.
I literally had to go like Thanos, and I don't want to have to be the villain, but when I went and did the Donda thing, Ye returned. And everybody had to sit back and watch the real leader.
Check out Drink Champs' conversation with Ye and many more legendary artists each and every Friday on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.
Look through your children's eyes to see the true magic of a forest. It's a storybook world for them. You look and see a tree. They see the wrinkled face of a wizard with arms outstretched to the sky. They see treasure in pebbles. They see a windy path that could lead to adventure. And they see you, their fearless guide through this fascinating world.
Find a forest near you and start exploring at discovertheforest.org. Brought to you by the United States Forest Service and the Ad Council.
Hello and welcome to It Could Happen Here, a podcast about the continual state of bad things happening and how sometimes you can make them less bad or not happen. And today we're going to, I'm Christopher Wong, by the way, and today we're going to be talking about Bosnia, a place where things went about as bad as they possibly can, and about how they're heading in very scary directions now. And with us to talk about this is Arnesa Kustrat. Arnesa is a genocide survivor and a academic expert on genocides in general. Arnesa, how are you doing?
I'm doing okay. I think all things considered.
Yeah.
Being sort of bombarded on a daily basis with, possible threats and talks about, a new conflict, war brewing in the Balkans is not an easy thing to contend.
Yeah, definitely with, not.
But yeah, but other than that, I'm doing great. Thanks for asking.
Yeah, I'm glad you could be here with me today, because the Balkans, extremely complicated place, which I guess is true of most places, but yeah, and so I guess that's where I wanted to go with my first question, because reading about what's happening now, my first instinct was go back to the Dayton Accords, but I'm actually not sure that that's even the best place to start. And so I wanted to, I guess, ask you if you're coming into looking at the Balkans for the first time and you're trying to understand what's going on now, where do you think is the best place to start on it? Because
I think, the best, God, it's so complicated.
Yeah.
We're talking about so much history, honestly. Yeah. But the thing is, let's start with the death of Tito. That's always a good place, I think, because that's really when things started to kind of shift in the Balkans, in the former, socialist Yugoslavia, was really once Tito died. And, his place became, empty as this sort of unifying factor of all the various ethnicities and nationalities within Yugoslavia. Once he was gone, that sort of left this vacuum that needed to be filled. And unfortunately, instead of being filled by another socialist, pro-equality, pro-unity leader, it was filled with a nationalist vacuum, which is kind of where we still are, unfortunately. It started obviously with little things, I think, with little sort of conversations and little subtle, I guess, ethno-nationalist rhetorics. And it just kind of like grew and spiraled from there. And obviously, that sort of thing led to Milosevic in Kosovo giving his infamous speech, which kind of really gave that full-fledged stamp on, okay, yes, this is a ultra-nationalist, ethno-nationalist president that we now have, who's threatening war across the other ethnicities. What do we do next? And at that point, that's when you sort of see the other countries start to secede. Slovenia, Croatia, they're attacked by Serbia. And then obviously, eventually, it goes down to Bosnia. And yeah, I mean, it starts with the ethno-nationalism, as it always does in the Balkans, I think. I don't think we're anything special in terms of having conflict with our neighbors. Look at France and England, or England and Ireland, or America and Mexico, or anyone, really. It's just, I think people make it sound as if we're special or we have these ancient hatreds, but, that's not really true. It all comes down to the freaking politics and the leaders. Yeah. And unfortunately, Milosevic was removed, but his policy, his beliefs continued to kind of stick around. I think, people think of people like Milosevic and Radovan Karadzic, who were, genocidal war criminals, as a thing of the past, but really you look at, the Serbian president, Vučić, or the Republika Srpska president, Milorad Dodik, and they're really just a continuation of Karadzic and Milosevic. So nothing, has fundamentally changed since Tito died, except, we got some new agreements, we got some new territories, some new ethnic lines drawn up, and new pretty buildings too. We have those now as well, but we don't really have that coexistence, at least not on paper, not in politics, certainly.
I want to go back for a second to, I guess, the moment of Tito dying, because it's always been a sort of interesting thing looking at it for me, because I remember, so from studying Chinese history, right, there's a period where in the 70s where it's okay, like everyone's looking for reform in China, and what you would consider like the sort of the I guess you could call them the, I don't know, left and right is complicated in China, but like there are a lot of sort of what you would call like the sort of left socialist, like democratic reformers who people like, they're looking at Yugoslavia as a model, and they're going, oh, we can have like workers' participation, and we can have these like democratic enterprises, and then that just implodes. And yeah, I wonder if we could talk a little bit more about that, because my very limited understanding of it is like there's an economic crisis from the oil shocks, and then once Tito dies, it's just like the wheels come off the whole system.
I mean, that's a really good way of like putting it. Like life in Yugoslavia, I don't think was like ever perfect, and I definitely don't think it was a perfect system. I think, me being a Bosnian who was born to very, I think, pro-Yugoslav parents, I just like many of my, fellow Yugoslavs or ex-Yugoslavs have a tendency to look at Yugoslavia with like rose-colored lenses, we think about the coexistence, the unity, the multi-ethnic part, the worker-owned, socialist models, the fact that our parents, were able to provide for their families and take vacations and travel and, get together and all these sort of wonderful things. But in the background, really in the sort of depths of the, politics and the economic issues were kind of always there. The one thing that Tito did was obviously he relied, unlike I think other socialist leaders of his time, is, he basically worked with anyone, the non-aligned movement, but also with the West, with Europe, so he wasn't very picky choosy. I think his ultimate goal really was, the betterment of the country by kind of any means necessary. But I think, he made mistakes just like other leaders do. And I think obviously we had, two issues. One, he was sick, he was dying. And two, there was an economic crisis happening. And three, then we had like the economic reforms, which really shifted the entire, they very much shifted the system that the Yugoslav people were very much used to. It became more and more privatized after his death. Mm-hmm. And Milosevic, he was a banker, he was a businessman, he was who he was. And I don't think that he ever really pretended to be a socialist.
Yeah.
Which is why I get so upset when the American leftists call him a socialist or call him an anti-imperialist, because those aren't even words that, he himself would have really used to describe himself, I think. But but I think, there was just, it was that sort of thing where there's an economic crisis brewing. They have no ways to really fix it. People are broke. People are starving. Suddenly the ownership, the worker, owned sort of model is being shifted to a more privatized model, and people are just not happy. What's a good way to distract from that?
Yep. Ethno-nationalism.
It's just, we see it happen everywhere. It's not a new, it's not like a new, tactic. It's a tactic that everyone has utilized. Blame it on the other. So Yugoslavia didn't really have, immigrants that they could blame it on, but they had Muslims.
Yep.
And they had the Kosovo, Albanians and the Bosnians, and that was, enough. And suddenly the conversation really shifted. And obviously I'm simplifying all of this.
Yeah.
A lot. It's so much more complicated. But there are books out there and that obviously go into a great, level of detail into the actual sort of breakup. So I can give some recommendations later. But but I think in that sort of very simplistic kind of sense is there was an economic crisis happening. A good way to sort of distract that was the use of ethno-nationalism, and it just kind of spiraled from there. I think, what Milosevic and what people like Milosevic always want is more power for themselves. And so his whole thing wasn't really ever about keeping Yugoslavia intact as Yugoslavia. It was keeping this vision of a greater Serbia alive. Because the thing is, if we had not had a person like Milosevic, if we just had somebody who was, the second Tito, maybe more or less worse or better, who cares? I think people would have been fine. I think, I don't see this like war breaking out. But instead we had Milosevic, who was like way more concerned about consolidating power, exerting that control. And when he realized that he could use ethno-nationalism to get to his goals, of course he was going to use that. Of course. Like, who wouldn't? We see it today with like what Trump did. he utilized, Muslims and immigrants and refugees and Black people, all as scapegoats to distract from all of the other things that are wrong with him, his leadership, and the overall country. And Milosevic did the same. He just did what any other politician did. And, that's the thing. I think, in thinking about Bosnia, Croatia, Slovenia, and all these countries that started to secede, I think if they had felt comfortable with, staying in a country that is multi-ethnic, at least in the case of Bosnians. I'm not going to speak for the Slovenians or Croatians because they have their own, I think, complicated identity. But with Bosnians, our thing collectively, I think, while we're not a monolith, but collectively was always, we are united, we are multi-ethnic, multi-religious, multicultural. And it's such a big part of like our entire history and identity. And so if the choice is being, under Serb control, being secondary citizens, not having that equality, not having that multi-ethnicity, of course, we're not going to take that choice.
Yeah.
Of course, people are going to want to, when you have like that, that boot on your neck of saying like, we're going to control you, we're going to take your land, and we're going to basically rule over you. Nobody wants to deal with that. And, unlike a lot of the other countries in former Yugoslavia, Bosnia really was the most multi-ethnic. It had one of the highest rates of, mixed ethnic marriages and multi-religious marriages. And that kind of remains true even today. So, especially in places like Sarajevo, Mostar, Banja Luka, the bigger cities, it has this very proud history of, coexistence and multi-ethnic coexistence. So I think what happened for so many people was just a huge amount of shock. My own family, so many people in my own family just did not think it could happen there. They grew up with this idea of a united, multi-ethnic Yugoslavia, brotherhood and unity. These are our neighbors, our friends, our teachers, our lovers, whatever. They work with us, they live next to us. Of course, they're not gonna, turn against us. And I think even while all the politicians were fear-mongering, while, Milosevic and Karadzic were sort of leading their campaigns of, especially Islamophobic propaganda, in newspapers, on the radio, on TV, any speech that they gave, they talked about how the Muslims were coming, we were going to make their daughters wear hijabs, we were going to take over, we were going to kill them, before. That's why they have to kill us, because they don't kill us, we're going to kill them. It was this whole, really brilliant propaganda campaign in so many ways that has now been replicated in so many other countries.
Oh, can we talk about that specifically for a second? Because I think there's something interesting in the way that, like, the way that you get people to do a genocide always seems to be, is like you can't. It's extremely hard to get someone to like just murder their neighbor because they don't like them. You have to do this like they're about to exterminate us, and that's why we have to like strike first. And that aspect of it, I think, is something that I see a lot when I do this. And you have done infinitely more genocide studies, so I want to hear what you.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. I it's so funny. I gave like an interview on this specific topic, I don't know, like 2 years ago. And I remember turning to the guy who was interviewing me, because he was just like, his look on his face was, I just don't understand. Like, I can't wrap my mind about how people could do that to their friends, neighbors, students, people they were sworn to like protect, and people they lived with their entire lives. How could they do that? Well, I turned to him and I said, I mean, if I told you right now, go kill him, you probably wouldn't. But if I came to you day in and day out, and I slowly started to kind of whisper in your ear, and I started to tell you, he's been really, really, I don't know, he's been saying a lot of stuff about you. He's been quite negative. Or I don't know, do you think he's kind of acting weird? I feel like he might be planning something. He might be planning to take over your house. He might be planning to, I don't know, probably attack your sister. I think he's going to kill your sister. I think he might make your sister wear hijab. So it's these very like slow, subtle things. And that's the thing that people don't understand. Violence never interrupts, never erupts out of nowhere. It's always planned. It brews and it brews and it brews and then it explodes. Then there's the thing. But it comes slowly. And that's how it was in Yugoslavia. It wasn't this sudden, oh yes, we're brothers and sisters forever, go Tito, go Yugoslavia, to, oh, I hate you because you're Muslim and I hate you because you're Serb and I hate you because you're a Croat. No, that was not the case. The case was that this was a very slow campaign of propaganda that started in the 80s, almost immediately after Tito's death, let's say. And it started very slow. Started with the sort of, I think, disenfranchisement of the Kosovo Albanians, and kind of the targeting of them. And again, yes, there was this economic component of it, but the way they wanted to kind of sidetrack that was, well, you're hungry because the Kosovo Albanians are not, and they're taking your jobs. Again, similar, tactics that we see even today.
Yep.
Yeah, so it's not that much different. But yeah, it starts slow, and the Milosevic and the Karadzic and the Mladic kind of campaigning was, God, it was brutal. I mean, and like I always say, it was kind of brilliantly executed in that it really got to people so much that then again, they turned neighbor against neighbor. It was subtle in the beginning. It was that sort of, what are the Muslims up to? Can we trust them? Can you trust your neighbor? Can you trust the Muslims? Talking about Islamicization, talking about Alireza Begović's book that he wrote when he was 18 or whatever, and talking about World War II. This was another thing. Like everybody knows that there was a period in World War II where a lot of Serbs were killed by the Ustasha and by the Nazi collaborationists, and I think obviously that's a real fear for a certain group of people who went through that. So there was a lot of that as well. That's going to happen again. That's going to happen again. Meanwhile, there was no grand plan. There was never even talks of, committing violence or even, talks of, seceding from Yugoslavia or anything. It was all set in motion by the Serbian leadership, and I think that's what people don't understand. The Bosnian leadership, while not perfect, were simply reacting to what the Serbian leadership was in many ways making them do. And that's kind of where, what happens in these situations. They kind of push you and push you and push you until they're able to get, some sort of rise out of you or a response out of you, or get you on that sort of offensive where you have to defend yourself, you have to defend your identity, you have to defend who you are, you have to justify it, and also in many ways. So yeah, this sort of propaganda campaign, God, there was, obviously the funny things were things like they're going to make you wear the hijab, but it was also very insidious because they would target these, villages where they were Bosnians and Serbs, living together. Mm-hmm. They're quite small, but they knew that in the village, obviously you usually have a gun or, a shotgun because of the animals or, working or whatever. So they would target them specifically with the radio. And Jesus. Instead of the big cities, they worked up to the big cities, but they really started in specific sort of areas, in Eastern Bosnia, especially because there was a lot of, I think, majority Muslim villages in that area that would also have nearby Serb villages. So yeah, I mean, there was that. There was, then sort of taking over all the radio stations and kind of going full force. I think in the sort of early days of the war, like we're talking April, May of 1992, they would get people like pretending that they were Bosnians, they were actually Serbs, and they would like talk about how they went to, kill all Serbs or something like that. There was also when they were like having people in concentration camps, where they like started kind of putting them in those concentration camps initially, they would make the victims in the concentration camps, the Muslims, basically, say that, oh, they're just there as a refugee and the Serbian army is like protecting them and they're making them feel really welcome and stuff like that. So it was right at the beginning, between especially 89 to like 92, the propaganda was so visible and it really escalated, and it was like suddenly everywhere. And you would hear Karadzic and Milosevic talk about, the Muslims and the things that we wanted and the goals that we had, which after all were not, nobody was saying it. There wasn't like a single person that was saying these things that they were attributing to us. But that didn't matter. What they were just doing was instilling enough fear and enough doubt in the population to eventually get them to take up arms when the time comes. And unfortunately, that's precisely what happened. When the time came, a lot of people did take up arms, whether or not they wanted to. They had enough of that doubt and fear sowed in their minds over the course of, several years, that they ended up feeling like, I have to protect myself. And I'm not saying that's the case for every Serb person. I think a lot of, especially in higher leadership positions, a lot of them were just sociopaths who wanted to kill. And I don't think it mattered why or how, because you're always going to get those kind of people.
Yeah.
But I think when we're talking about how that shift happened so fast, we have to obviously discuss the propaganda, the huge amount of propaganda that went into implementing it.
So I guess
it was like such a tangent. Oh my god.
No, it's okay. No, that was really great. Yeah, and I think I guess like I think it's incredibly important for everyone to understand that propaganda works. Like if you just say something over and over and over again, like it does, eventually it pays off, and the quote unquote payoff here is the genocide. And I guess, I'm not sure how far into detail you want to get into this here, but I think one thing I want to kind of focus on, because I think from reading what you've been saying about this, that this wound up being a big deal with like why things are sort of still fucked now, which is that like the international response to this. Like, I mean, one of the things I was always just like haunted by is there's this quote by Mitterrand, who's the Prime Minister of France. He's like, this is supposed to be the socialist. He's like the guy that like they finally put in power after like all of the stuff in the 60s. And he has this line about like, I'm sorry, I wish I'd pulled up the exact quote, but it's basically like,
I know the quote.
Yeah. Do you want us to say it? I don't remember the exact.
I know the quote.
Yeah.
It's what was it? A peaceful but necessary reconstruction of a Christian Europe.
Yeah.
And Bosnia does not belong. So I remember it very specifically. It's really stayed with me for such a long time, because he said that at a time where the Bosnian Muslims were just completely defenseless. They were being dragged away to concentration camps. The massacres were already well underway. We're not talking about Srebrenica in 95. We're talking about Visegrad, Sarajevo, Foča, Gorazde, even Srebrenica in 92. This is all in 1992. The things that happen in places like Brčko and Zvornik and all these like places that I think the vast majority of people don't really know about and hear about. Like in Visegrad, a lot of my family is from there. Within a span of 3 months, that entire town, which was once almost entirely Bosniak Muslim, was ethnically cleansed. And that was done through forced deportations, concentration camps, mass rapes and rape camps of women, and obviously a lot of murders. So we're talking about one small town that took, 3 months. And my family, when it comes to that town, on both my mother's and my father's side, interestingly enough, has like such a long history. My parents fell in love there when they were like kids. So, my grandmother's house was there, my grandfather's house was there, on like both sides. And they, so it's this beautiful little town where, Bosniaks and Serbs and Croats lived, and Jews and Roma. And, my parents talk about the beauty of it and this wonderful sort of experience that they had when they lived there. My mom is from Sarajevo, and so am I as well, obviously, but Visegrad was like the place that she would go kind of like for the weekend, just because of the family that we had there. So very special, I think, in her heart, my grandpa's heart as well. And, within, it's just like so hard to like fathom that within just a few months, that town was completely ethnically cleansed. And that the international community knew this and did nothing. There is, I believe it's in the Clinton tapes as well, but there's this thing about how they had provided aerial footage of the massacres that were being enacted in places like Buchko and Zvornik, where, oh my God, the paramilitary Serb forces did some horrifying acts of like violence and torture against the civilians. And they had, showed it to the Clintons, and they showed it to the French and the English, and they did nothing. They knew in 1992 that a genocide was unfolding, and the Dayton Peace Agreement wasn't signed until 1995. So the international community, I think, has just as much of a responsibility in the genocide of the Bosniaks as Serbia does, because they sat there and they watched when they had all the power to stop it. They always had the power to stop it. They had the power to stop it before even one person got killed. And two, it's not even that they just watched, it's that they purposely left the Muslims defenseless, because Serbia had all the Yugoslav army.
Yep.
All the weapons, all the, everything, all the tools that they needed to commit genocide. They already had it. They had all the arsenal, everything. And the Yugoslav army was like the most powerful in the region at the time. And I think the third or fourth most powerful in like the Europe, Turkey area. So, quite a powerful army. And there was Bosnia, which had no weapons, no military. You see these pictures of like civilians fighting against, tanks and mortar shells and snipers. And it's like these, youths basically in like Converse and jeans and like an army jacket playing soldier because that's all we had. We had the homemade weapons. We had how to make your own bomb books kind of thing, and trying to basically defend ourselves with anything that we could. They specifically did not lift the arms embargo, knowing that they were leaving us defenseless. Like they just knew. There was no way, there was no doubt on everything that we have read about the international community response, everything that Clinton, Mitterrand, John Major, not Mayor, Major have said, about it during that period, shows us that they absolutely knew that we were defenseless, and this wasn't, a lot of people say I didn't know about the Bosnian genocide, but it was discussed. I've looked at the archived footage. It was talked about on television. It was brought up in Parliament and in Senate. There was people at the time who were like, why are we leaving the Bosnians defenseless? Why are we, not helping them? Why are we allowing them to be led into slaughter? This is genocide, blah, blah, blah. So even as early as 92, 93, there was still people who knew about this stuff, were telling the leaders, but nothing.
Yeah, and I think like that part also, like it's not just that like they did nothing, like they did worse than do nothing. Like, I mean, Mitterrand's actively cheering it on. Like, you know, the arms embargo is just like the arms embargo. If you're applying an arms embargo on a conflict where one side has tanks and the other side has like Molotovs, like you are actively supporting one of the sides, and I think that like that just like is completely lost in how like almost everyone seems to talk about this now, because there's like, you know, because when you sort of get like interventions later, like people are like, oh look, the West was like planning to intervene here the whole time, and it's like, no, like they were literally cheering. Like Mitterrand was cheering. Like, it's like,
it's so frustrating because, you know, you take what we know about, and here's the thing, I know that Islamophobia escalated after 9/11, but Islamophobia has existed for a very long time. Yep. And I think talk to the Black Muslims of America, they will tell you more, you know, better than I could ever tell you about the history of Islamophobia in the United States. So Islamophobia was always an aspect of life. And in Europe, Islamophobia, just like anti-Semitism, I mean, It is like the staple of European cultural cuisine, so to say.
Yeah, it's like there's they have the Triforce of European civilization is anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, and hating the Roma.
Yep.
It's like those are just like yeah,
par for the force. And so I think this sort of thing about the explicitness of European leadership, especially at the time, in you know, effectively ensuring that we were killed off because a Muslim country in Europe could not exist.
Yep.
And that's the thing that they said, literally said, a Muslim country in Europe cannot exist. Like, the fact that that was so open and brazen, like, kind of takes me back, but it really, like, tells you how much Islamophobia formed, I think, the international community response on this. And it's so interesting to me now. I think I've seen it over the past, I would say, especially 5 years, this sort of leftist genocide denialism, this sort of leftist anti-imperialist kind of defense of Milosevic, and they were the Serbs were the actual victims, blah, 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 NATO, blah, 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 Western intervention. And I'm just like, oh my God, read a book, read an article from that time, read their actual quotes. There's no way that you can actually convince me that Europe, Fortress Europe, and the United States of America would do anything that would benefit, you know, the Muslims.
Was this one of the things I think is really interesting to me about the way that the sort of like left genocides nihilism works? Is that it always seems to be rooted in Islamophobia. Like, and I remember started seeing this with Bosnia too, where they're like, oh yeah, well it's because, well, it's okay. They have two things. One, it's like, well, the Bosnians were Nazis, but the second one was that, oh well, the Bosnians were like all jihadists. Yeah. And it's like it's the exact same thing you see with China, and it's like, oh, it's because all the Uyghurs are like Salafi jihadists, ISIS, CIA, and it's like, no.
Yeah. I mean, it's it's honestly laughable at this point. It really is, and it also just, you know, obviously I'm a leftist. You know, I'm gonna cheer the left on to an extent, but that is my red line. The genocide denialism really is my red line, and the reason it's you know, my red line isn't just because I'm a genocide survivor, but because it's like, oh, for God's sake, the data, the statistics, the research, the forensic, the analysis, the specific quotes, videos, articles, you know, all of those things exist and are out there, and all you have to do is actually do your research, and you will find out that actually, no, you're in the wrong. And the other thing is what you just said about this sort of thing of painting, you know, the Muslims as like the Nazis and the, you know, the extremists. You know, the thing about like the Bosnian Muslims is like, we don't hide the fact that there were people of our community that participated in Nazi Ustasha crimes. There isn't this goal of concealing those crimes, of minimizing the crimes or pretending that they were right. there is, I'm sure, a fringe group of people who defend these kinds of people, like there is a fringe, but I'm talking about the collective sort of Bosnian, state level response, as well as like an individual response, is that the Nazi division had like 17,000 Bosnian soldiers, and there was millions of Bosnians in the country. The vast majority ended up joining the partisans and stood against the Nazis. And the thing is, when it comes to Yugoslavia and World War II and the Holocaust, you can't just say that the Bosnians were Nazi collaborationists, because the thing is, so were the Serbians, so were the Serbs, so were the Croats. At that time, let's be honest, who the hell wasn't a Nazi collaborationist? Now, this doesn't excuse it, absolutely not. But what it does sort of show is that history, that period, in Yugoslav history is really complicated, because, you had the Ustasha, and then you had the Chetniks, and then there's a period where the Chetniks were against the Ustasha, right? Because like the Ustasha were killing Serbs and Romans and Jews. But then the Chetniks turn around and they're, these Serb nationalists, they start killing the Jews and the Roma. Yeah. And then they start working with the Ustasha to hunt down the Jews and the Roma. And then they start working with them to stand against the Tito's partisans. Meanwhile, Tito's partisans had a multi-ethnic coalition. Yeah. Again, we're talking about Serbs, Bosnians, Roma, Jews, Croats.
Hi, this is Jill Winterstein, host of the Spirit Daughter podcast, where we talk about astrology, natal charts, and how to step into your most vibrant life. And I just sat down with a Minnie Driver.
The Irish traveller said when I was 16, you're going to have a terrible time with men.
Actor, storyteller, and unapologetic Aquarian visionary. Aquarius is all about freedom-loving and different perspectives, and I find a lot of people with strong placements in Aquarius are misunderstood. A Sun and Venus in Aquarius in her 7th house spark her unconventional approach to partnership.
He really has taught me to embrace people sleeping in different rooms, on different houses, in different places, but just an embracing of the isness of it all.
If you're navigating your own transformation or just want a chart-side view into how a leading artist integrates astrology, creativity, and real life, this episode is a must listen. Listen to the Spirit Daughter podcast starting on February 24th on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your podcasts.
I'm Clayton Eckerd, and in 2022, I was the lead of ABC's The Bachelor.
Unfortunately, it didn't go according to plan. He became the first Bachelor to ever have his final rose rejected. The internet turned on him.
If I could press a button and rewind it all, I would.
But what happened to Clayton after the show made even bigger headlines. It began as a one-night stand and ended in a courtroom, with Clayton at the center of a very strange paternity scandal.
The media is here. This case has gone viral.
The dating contract.
Agree to date me, but I'm also suing you.
Please search warrant.
This is unlike anything I've ever seen before.
I'm Stephanie Young. This is Love Trapped. This season, an epic battle of he said, she said, and the search for accountability in a sea of lies.
I have done nothing except get pregnant by the Bachelor!
Listen to Love Trapped on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
What if mind control is real?
If you could control the behavior of anybody around you, what kind of life would you have?
Can you hypnotically persuade someone to buy a car?
When you look at your car, you're going to become overwhelmed with such good feelings.
Can you hypnotize someone into sleeping with you?
I gave her some suggestions to be sexually aroused.
Can you get someone to join your cult?
NLP was used on me to access my subconscious.
NLP, aka Neuro-Linguistic Programming, is a blend of hypnosis, linguistics, and psychology. Fans say it's like finally getting a user manual for your brain.
It's about engineering consciousness.
Mind Games is the story of NLP. Its crazy cast of disciples and the fake doctor who invented it at a New Age commune and sold it to guys in suits. He stood trial for murder and got acquitted. The biggest mind game of all? NLP might actually work.
This is wild.
Listen to Mind Games on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome to the A Building. I'm Hans Charles.
I'm Menelik Lumumba. It's 1969. Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr. had both been assassinated, and Black America was at a breaking point. Rioting and protests broke out on an unprecedented scale.
In Atlanta, Georgia, at Martin's alma mater, Morehouse College, the students had their own protest. It featured two prominent figures in Black history, Martin Luther King Sr. and a young student, Samuel L. Jackson.
To be in what we really thought was a revolution. I mean, people were dying.
1968, the murder of Dr. King, which traumatized everyone.
The FBI had a role in the murder of a Black Panther leader in Chicago.
This story is about protest. It echoes in today's world far more than it should, and it will blow your mind.
Listen to the A Building on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Albanians, all sorts of people who were very anti-Nazism, pro, we're gonna win, we're gonna rebuild our country, we're gonna make this beautiful sort of multi-ethnic kind of state, which they did, which is amazing. But it is a complicated sort of piece of history, so you can't really say, oh yes, they're the Nazi collaborationists, because at some point or not, everybody was, and at some point or not, everybody was also partisan.
Yeah. It's like it's when you start getting into it becomes this it becomes a way of getting people to, I don't know how to describe it. When it starts being like this specific ethnic group as a whole is responsible for all of these crimes, it's like, no, they're not. Like that's not how this works. Like it's not there's going to be people in the ethnic group who did things that were awful. There's also going to be people, especially in a situation like this, there's a lot of probably more people who fought them.
Yeah.
And that, I mean, yeah.
That's such an interesting statement, because I'm going to compare it to the Bosnian response after the genocide, which has consistently been, no, we don't believe that every single Serb is bad.
Yeah.
And we are only talking about those that took part in these crimes, and those that concealed them. And that has always been the collective and state level response of all Bosnians. Now, you have to think about, I have a friend who's 99 members of her family were killed in Srebrenica in July of 1995. That's an absorbent number of people.
Yeah.
These were women, children, and men, and elderly. There was no discrimination when it comes to her. I've sat with her as she's read all the names of her, killed family members. That woman, with all the pain that she survived, with being there as a young girl in the midst of genocide, in the midst of these her horrifying crimes, has never once, publicly or privately, to me said, yes, all Serbs are the same. Yes, all of them are war criminals. Yes, all of them hate us. Absolutely not. And the thing is, I think about myself as well. My earliest childhood memory is me being shot at by a sniper, knowing my father was in a concentration camp, knowing that my grandmother was just killed by a bomb, knowing that, my biological dad was dying in a hospital from an attack, and my mother could also be killed because she was pregnant with my brother at the time. And so these are my earliest childhood memories.
Mm-hmm.
They're not very happy memories. And I know why those things happened. I know why I was being shot at by a sniper, and it was because I was Bosnian. It was because I was Muslim, and because I was seen as the enemy, even though I was, a little kid at, 6-7 years old, and absolutely not a threat to anyone. And nobody should have been shooting at me. They did anyway. Even though that happened, I never had that feeling of all Serbs are awful. All Serbs are, I'm going to paint them all with a brush. But a lot of them, unfortunately, especially on the ultra nationalists that continue to not just deny the genocide, but also glorify it and celebrate it, they do paint everyone with the same brush, And And the worst thing, the funniest thing, is that they paint themselves with the same brush. You know, they think that they get to speak for every single Serb person.
Yep.
And that's the tragic path. Like, I get accused of like constantly talking shit about Serbs, and I'm like, I absolutely am not. I'm talking about the nationalists, and I will call out all the nationalists, whether they're Bosnian, Serbian, Croatian, American, whatever. But we're talking about, you know, what you're doing to me and your response to my criticism of nationalism is actually the thing that's ruining your reputation.
Yeah, it's the ethno-nationalist gambit. It's you have to conflate all of the individual people, the ethnic group, and the state. They all have to be this, like, you know, there's supposed to be this like organic totality, and it's not true. It's just not. But that's, you know, that's the sort of it's the modus operandi behind their entire ideology, and it's what they deploy. You know, it's what they deploy when they do genocides. It's what they deploy when they have to sort of like, you know, sort of promote it. Yeah. Openly or less openly afterwards.
Yeah, it's like that justification. It's how they justify it. I think, you know, and like we all know about the 10 stages of genocide, but my colleague, who's brilliant, actually has often talked about that denialism is not really the final stage of genocide. It is, in fact, triumphalism. And that's what we're actually seeing in Bosnia. You know, I get genocide denialism from American leftists and like British leftists who are on a certain spectrum and of a certain belief. I don't get genocide denialism from ethno-nationalist Serbs. What I get from them actually is very openly celebrating and threatening another genocide. They're not in my mentions saying, oh, there was no genocide.
Yep.
They're in my mentions saying no Žica Srebrenica, which is basically a slogan that says knife, wire, Srebrenica, and it's like basically a threat that another Srebrenica will occur. They're in my mentions, in my emails, and in my DMs, sending me threats about how they can't wait till I'm put in a rape camp again, how they can't wait till they kill my family, till Sarajevo gets bombed again, how, you know, they're going to finish the job, how Ratko Mladic is a hero because he killed all those, you know, people in Srebrenica and Sarajevo and Visegrad. Karadzic is a hero because he did the same. Milosevic is a hero because he believes in a greater Serbia. These people don't hide it.
Yep.
And that's the thing. So it's very, like, just today, you know, first thing in the morning, I open my Twitter, and the first thing that I see is a Bosnian activist arrested for protesting the Ratko Mladic mural, which the Serbian police were guarding. They were guarding a mural, a mural of a war criminal who committed genocide, who everybody knows committed genocide, a mural glorifying him. The police were guarding, you know, the mural and inflicting damage on innocent civilians who were there to, you know, protest against the mural. And so I think that really tells you so much about the issue in the Balkans.
This has been It Could Happen Here. Join us tomorrow for part 2 of this interview, in which we discuss the dangers of what's currently happening in Bosnia. In the meantime, find us on Twitter at HappenHerePod. And you can find us on Twitter and Instagram for the rest of our shows at Cool Sound Media.
I'm Colleen Witt. Join me, the host of Eating While Broke podcast, while I eat a meal created by self-made entrepreneurs, influencers, and celebrities over a meal they once ate when they were broke.
Today I have the lovely AJ Crimson, the official princess of Compton, Asia, Kid and Asia.
This is the professor. We're here on Eating While Broke, and today I'm going to break down my meal that got me through a time when I was broke.
Listen to Eating While Broke on the iHeartRadio app, on Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
What grows in the forest? Trees? Sure. Know what else grows in the forest? Our imagination, our sense of wonder, and our family bonds grow too. Because when we disconnect from this and connect with this. We reconnect with each other. The forest is closer than you think. Find a forest near you and start exploring at discovertheforest.org. Brought to you by the United States Forest Service and the Ad Council.
Welcome to It Could Happen Here, a podcast about bad things happening and how they can continue to happen if you don't stop them. I'm your host, Christopher Wong, and today we're doing part 2 of the interview with genocide expert Arnesa Kustra, focusing on the absolutely horrifying things that have been happening in Bosnia recently. Here's the interview. Hope you enjoy. Can you give an explanation of what's happened in the last couple of weeks? Because it's terrifying, and I don't think enough people are talking about it.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, so that's, where are we now? I'm just going to talk briefly about the Dayton Agreement, because I think the audience needs to understand what the Dayton Agreement is, and I was going to talk about it earlier, but I went off on a tangent, so my apologies. So obviously, where the war is happening, the genocide is happening. Srebrenica, 1995, the worst of the genocide happens. 8,000 people are killed in just a matter of a few weeks, few days, really. The international community does not act at that time. Towards the end of the year, another attack happens in Sarajevo and Markale. Civilians are once again targeted, waiting for bread, fruit. I think it was humanitarian aid at the market. And that's kind of when the international community starts to open their eyes a bit, and negotiations start. And not to bore you with the details, the negotiation process was absolutely ridiculous. And every single time they discussed it, it was about splitting Bosnia down ethnic lines. And that's ultimately what happened with the Dayton Agreement. Yes, peace, quote unquote, peace was achieved, but the Dayton Agreement mandated so that there would be a 3-member presidency. So instead of having one president, we would have a 3-member presidency. It's a rotating presidency. There would be a Croat representative, a Bosniak representative, and a Serb representative. That also means that there's no representatives for anyone who's an other, whether they identify as Yugoslav, Roma, Jewish, Bosnian, but not Bosniak. Like it's just, there's no space for the other in this constitution, this Dayton Peace Agreement, but that's for another day. They also split the country down by ethnic lines. So all of those genocides and ethnic cleansing that the Serbs had just been committing all over Eastern Bosnia, up in the north, basically the international community said, good job, here's your own territory that you ethnically cleansed.
Yeah.
So they split the country down, these ethnic lines, and, the war stops. And then now we have to sort of contend with this, peace agreement with the new constitution. We get this called the OHR, the Office of the High Representative. The High Representative is basically a person who holds the highest power in the country. They're not a Bosnian. They're actually kind of, they're put in place there by the international community. So the OHR kind of, comes and breaks us up when we're squabbling over issues. And this has been anything from things like the flag, like the new flag of Bosnia. The flag of Bosnia that was the flag of Bosnia had to sort of be replaced because the OHR deemed that it would be, offensive to the Serbs or the Croats. And the same thing with like the national anthem. So they hold a lot of power. Now, just recently, we switched OHR representatives. So we have a new high representative. Before it was Valentin Inzko. And his final kind of part of his, time as the high representative was to enact a law against genocide denialism, which the Bosnians have really been campaigning for years, because, I think in your birthplace, in the place where the worst crime ever could, happen to you, where, 50,000 women were raped, 100,000 people were killed. 600 plus mass graves were, dug up to hide the crimes and the massacres.
Yep.
People want to be able to, know the truth and feel safe with the truth. So the genocide denialism law was good, but this is kind of when things started to, shift a bit, because I think Dodik came out, Milorad Dodik, who is currently the Serb member of the presidency, who controls Republika Srpska, which is the entity that's considered the Serb entity, but Bosniaks also live there as well. He came out and he said, well, if they pass the genocide denialism law, we're going to secede within 8 days. And obviously that didn't happen.
Yeah.
Months ago. And here's the thing. Milorad Dodik has been threatening secession for years now. This is not anything new. What is new is the fact that this time he seems to not just talk and threaten about seceding, but actually has started to kind of drop the papers. And not to legally secede, which he's not allowed due to the Dayton Agreement, but he has drawn up the papers to start pulling out of all the national level. So, Bosnia is the country, Republika Srpska is an entity, the Federation is an entity, but both of them are accountable to the national sort of state level institutions. He's basically at this point, been saying, Republika Srpska, the Serbs, we're leaving. Like we're gonna form our own army.
Yeah.
We're gonna pull out all the Bosnian state institutions. We're gonna have Serb only courts, Serb only lawyers, Serb only justices, Serb only, passport, whatever, control, Serb, basically anything that was at a national level, whether that's like a healthcare institution or like, procurement for supplies for the office.
Yep.
They're going to have it as like Serb only. Obviously, I think the danger is right there. Serb only. Where have we heard that before? We heard that back in the 90s. And the biggest sort of red flag has really been this thing about them forming the Republika Srpska army. And they're not even talking about forming a new army. He specifically stated the words reforming the Republika Srpska army. Now, the Republika Srpska army, was led by Karadzic and Mladic in the 1990s. These are the same people that put girls as young as 10 and 12 years old into rape camps, that killed babies as old as, a few months, that killed, elderly women as old as 100 years old. These were the guys that were going village to village, city to city, killing, torturing, bombing the hell out of Sarajevo. These were the guys that, would throw like 3,000 to 4,000 mortar shells on Sarajevo and snipe it. I don't even know how many times, like tens of thousand times per day. It's just, these are the bad guys, basically. So I think there is an alarm right now going in Bosnia, and it is the reason why so many of us are quite worried, quite frightened, because on one hand, he has threatened, he has made, Dodik has made plenty of threats before.
Yep.
But on the other hand, in prior times, the international community has somewhat gotten involved. The US has sanctioned him, the UK has scolded him, the EU has said, like, you got to chill out, otherwise, Serbia doesn't get into the EU. There's always been some sort of, influence there, the OHR's influence as well. But in recent years, the international community has not stood by its responsibility to the Dayton Agreement. I mean, here's the thing. They implemented this agreement. They made it so that we, the Bosnians, have to abide by it. But they also have a responsibility to ensure that it is actually being upheld and that they're doing their job in accordance with the international, like with the Dayton Agreement. So, the Dayton Agreement was very kind of specific that it was, one, a temporary solution, and two, the international community was to work on finding a more permanent solution.
Yep.
that will bring about, actual sort of reconciliation and justice and all of these things. But they didn't. They've left sort of Bosnia to kind of live on its own. And now they're not really doing much. I mean, the EU, the US, they're doing their typical thing of strongly worded open letters. And Dodik seems less afraid than ever before. He seems very brash. I mean, he is a fool and a half and an ultra nationalist, but right now I feel like he has so much confidence, and I think he also knows that like the US and the EU have so many bigger problems to worry about rather than Bosnia, and so we're just not a priority, so he can play around with it. And then we're also, seeing like the Secretary of State, Matthew Palmer, hanging out with him the day after this man openly stated on national television that he's reforming Republika Srpska. And they're being very cozy and very friendly and stuff like that. And here's the thing, I've never been really a big believer on the international community because, come on, like I have, the experience speaks for itself. I've already lived their help, and I'm like, no, thanks. Please stay away. But I don't live in that world. I live in a world where, I'm from a small country that is unfortunately very dependent on outsiders and on the international community. So while I would love to say, well, fuck the EU, fuck the US, we don't need them. The reality is that we do need them. We do need them to do their jobs. And because if they don't, I am really worried that the situation is going to continue to escalate further and further. And this appeasement of Dodik, especially in the last several years, has gone on so much that at this point, I think you have to like start to wonder, like, does the international community, even want peace and stability in Bosnia, or do they benefit from our constant instability? And what is their long-term plan? So that's kind of where we're at right now. I think there's the people in Bosnian politics and activist circles right now who are calling on US leadership, who are calling on EU leadership. And there's a lot of, oh no, the EU sucks, the US will help us, the US sucks, the EU will help us, Turkey is going to help us, no, Turkey sucks. There's a lot of like disagreement. I think the reality is that, oh my God, does it suck that we are in this position where we have to rely on external sources, because once again, we are feeling alone. Once again, we're sort of being backed into a corner. And once again, we're being threatened with a prospect of, a new war. And I think the reality is the minute that he gives that green light for that Republika Srpska army to be formed, there will be violence. And we've seen what happened before. We cannot afford to even have one act of violence. We cannot afford to have even one person injured, let alone die, because these people in Bosnia on all sides have suffered so unbelievably much. They are exhausted. They are still burying their loved ones 26 years later. They still haven't, found that peace. They're worried and scared for their future, and they deserve so much more. They really, really do. So I think, I'm hoping and praying that we obviously continue talking about this issue, and we try to pressure those people in power to, calm the situation down. But the reality is that this is going to be our future for as long as Dayton exists. And until the Bosnian constitution is completely reformed and Dayton is completely either thrown out or reformed to actually allow for a, actual multi-ethnic united country that's not broken up across ethnic, lines, and it's not ethnically segregated, we're going to continue being in the situation. So yes, for right now, I think let's talk about this and let's kind of pressure those powerful people, but really long term, it's time to start thinking about ending the Dayton Agreement, and it's time to start thinking about actually building that, multi-ethnic, multicultural, multi-religious country that we fought for.
You were saying like, okay, like what is, what does Europe actually want out of this? And you know, I mean, I think it's pretty clear, like, okay, so, you know, the Dayton Accords are like, okay, we're just going to give all of the ethno-nationalists, like, their own fiefdom, right? It's like, okay, here's your reward for the genocide. You get your, like, yeah, and I think, you know, like, that's a very classical, you know, that's what Europeans do, right? It's like, yep. Yeah, they come in, they support ethno-nationalists, and it's like, you know, they don't want this. Like, they don't actually want, like, a functioning multi-ethnic, multiracial society, because, you know, the horror, wait, hold on, what if other people look at that and go, wait, why do we have, like, yeah, and I think that, I don't know, I think you see this both, you know, back in what they were originally doing in the 90s, and, you know, they come in later and are like, oh, hey, look, we're heroes, we helped them do the genocide, and then kind of sort of did something maybe later. And I think, like, yeah, I don't know, just the possibility of that happening again, the possibility of it just being, you know, it's like, oh, hey, we have Bosnia. This is where we do press tours for, like, why the American army is good, and like, fuck anyone else who actually lives there is just, yeah.
I mean, like, come on, they're America. Like, let's be honest here. Like, I'm not saying they're an all-powerful entity, but what I am saying is that if they really wanted to, the people who are in power would not be in power, right? Like,
yeah.
But these people like Dodik, people like Dragan Čović, who is the Croatian ethno-nationalist leader, who is also, by the way, directly involved in this mess. And once again, we're seeing that thing of the 90s of, you know, Croatia and Serbia want to split Bosnia up and, you know, break it for themselves, basically. That's, you know, it's just now, instead of Franjo Tuđman and Milošević, it's now Čović and, you know, Dodik. I talk about Dodik a lot more because I think he's a more immediate threat, but it's important that we don't forget that Bosnia is also facing the Croatian threat as well. And, you know, but I think about it this way. Like, I know for a fact that if these people did not benefit the system somehow, they would not actually be in power.
Yeah.
But they do benefit them. And I think, you know, Madeleine Albright called Milorad Dodik a breath of fresh air.
God.
In, you know, the 90s when he came to power. And now here we are, you know.
Yep.
Dodik's threatening war and threatening secession and talking about Serb-only, you know, spaces and Serb-only armies. And it's just, it's exhausting. But yeah, it's also funny. It is funny when you think about it, because the reality is that it never had to be like this, and it doesn't have to be like this in the future either. But unfortunately, it will continue to be like this, because that's just, you know, what the powerful want, like what those actually who have some power want. And that's the thing that sucks, because when you know, I feel like I'm starting to sound conspiratorial, but I'm not. You know, when you think about like Europe overall and how they looked at Bosnia, I think for the last, you know, 100 years, and their policy towards Bosnia, it's really difficult for me to kind of be filled with any sort of confidence about what their plans are, you know.
Yeah. I mean, it's Europe and the United States, two countries that historically have never done anything bad, have never done any genocides, and have never just absolutely annihilated countries.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, you know, they're the good guys. And like you said, you know, Bosnians, there so much as like this press tour for, you know, these politicians to come and to talk about why we're such a great example of the peace process, when we're not, you know. And the thing is, you know, they'll come on and they'll say, well, while Dayton wasn't perfect, it was the best solution at the time. And it's like,
no, it wasn't.
It was not.
Yeah.
You know, but they have convinced themselves that this was like a win for intervention and win for the international community. Now, don't get me wrong. I, alongside everyone I know, is extremely happy that the war ended and that the genocide ended. And I think until you're in that position of growing up in the midst of, you know, all these bombs and murders and tortures all around you, and you know, the only sound you ever hear are the sounds of bombs and mortars falling and snipers shooting at you. you won't really know how it feels when that finally stops and when you have some peace, and how difficult it can be to think about, obviously, any future sort of prospects of war. And I think that also is a contributing factor to the overall instability of Bosnia, because for 26 years now, our policy as a people, but as a country as well, has been as long as there's no shooting, which is not a sound policy, because, settling for the bare minimum is not helping any of us. Our youths are leaving in absurd amounts to Germany, to Austria, to the United States. People are struggling for jobs. People are struggling to find food. All of these things, on top of the threat of war and violence and conflict. So it's not a sound policy, and I'm just hoping it will change eventually somehow. I mean, I'm going to keep doing my part, which is yelling at people in their on Twitter and in person, and pressuring them to do the right thing and to obviously talk about this. But I just feel like we have such a long road ahead of us, and peace is a process. It's a process. So I think we're just at the beginning of that process. So much more to do.
I think that's a good place to end on, with just the realization that, I mean, if there's no fundamental change in the structures and the forces and in the politics that created a war, that created genocide, like, it's going to happen again. And so you have to actually change it. You can't just sort of put this Band-Aid on it and put it in stasis and just leave all the structures intact. You have to, you have to knock them over before you can build something else.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, Anessa, thank you so much for talking with me. Where can people find you, and what books do you want to read? Because as we've said over and over again on this podcast, do not get your information from podcasts. Actually read books. This is the thing you need to do.
Well, if you, obviously, I know our audience can't see it, but here's one of my little selections of books on Bosnia. Obviously, people can find me on Twitter. Type in my name, ARNESA, but my @ is @RRRRNESSA. Yeah, Twitter's probably the best place. But also, I have a book out, so if people want to read it, it is about the Bosnian genocide, and it is based on real-life experiences of my family and friends. It's called Letters from Diaspora. It's more so on the emotional side of things. But if you want to learn about the conflict from a leftist perspective, I always recommend, and I don't know where it's going now, but I always recommend Bosnia, Kosovo, and Yugoslavia by Mike Karadzic. It's the Marxist perspective on the breakup of Yugoslavia. Additionally, I have a PDF on my Twitter of tons of books. So if you want to learn more about Yugoslavia, about Islam in the Balkans, about the history of Bosnia, about the war genocide, feel free to just shoot me a DM. I have a handy little guide that I hand out constantly to people. And there's also a list of books on my website and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think I can post it. We can put a link to it in the description. I've read some stuff on there. It's very good. You should read it.
Thanks. I pride myself on, curating really good reading lists.
Yeah.
Depending on topic. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, Anessa, thank you again. This has been It Could Happen Here. Find us at It Could Happen Here Pod on Twitter and Instagram. The rest of the shows that we do you can find it at the Cool Zone on the same places. And yeah, oh boy, genocide bad. Hope there's no Boer work to stop them.
Hey, we'll be back Monday with more episodes every week from now until the heat death of the universe.
It Could Happen Here is a production of Cool Zone Media. For more podcasts from Cool Zone Media, visit our website, coolzonemedia.com, or check us out on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to podcasts. You can find sources for It Could Happen Here updated monthly at coolzonemedia.com/sources. Thanks for listening.
Raffi is the voice of some of the happiest songs of our generation.
Baby Beluga.
So, who is the man behind Baby Beluga?
Every human being wants to feel respected. When we start with young children, all good things can grow from there.
I'm Chris Garcia, comedian, new dad, and host of Finding Raffi, a new podcast from iHeartRadio and Fatherly. Listen every Tuesday on the iHeartRadio app or wherever you get your podcasts.
The art world, it is essentially a money laundering business.
The best fakes are still hanging on people's walls. You know, they don't even know or suspect that they're fakes.
I'm Alec Baldwin, and this is a podcast about deception, greed, and forgery in the art world.
I just walked in and saw this bright red painting, presuming to be a Rothko.
Of course, art forgeries only happen because there's money to be made. A lot of money.
I'm listening to what they're paying for these things. It was incredible amounts of money.
You knew the painting was fake.
Listen to Art Fraud starting February 1st on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Hi, I'm Robert Sex Reese, host of the Dr. Sex Reese Show. And every episode, I listen to people talk about their sex and intimacy issues, and yes, I despise every minute of it. I mean, she made mistakes too, right?
That's true. She did kill everyone at her wedding.
But hell is real. We're all trapped here, and there's nothing any of us can do about it. So join me, won't you?
Listen to the Dr. Sex Reese Show every Tuesday on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcast, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Hi, it's Jill Winterstein, host of the Spirit Daughter podcast, where we talk about astrology, natal charts, and how to step into your most vibrant life. And today I'm talking with my dear friend, Krista Williams.
It can change you in the best way possible. Dance with the change, dance with the breakdowns.
The embodiment of Pisces intuition with Capricorn power moves.
So I'm like delusionally proud of my chart.
Listen to the Spirit Daughter podcast starting on February 24th on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your podcasts.
I'm Nancy Glass, host of the Burden of Guilt Season 2 podcast. This is a story about a horrendous lie that destroyed two families. Late one night, Bobby Gumpright became the victim of a random crime. The perpetrator was sentenced to 99 years until a confession changed everything.
I was a monster.
Listen to Burden of Guilt Season 2 on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
I'm Clayton Eckerd. In 2022, I was the lead of ABC's The Bachelor.
But here's the thing. Bachelor fans hated him.
If I could press a button and rewind it all, I would.
That's when his life took a disturbing turn. A one-night stand would end in a courtroom.
The media is here. This case has gone viral.
The dating contract.
Agree to date me, but I'm also suing you.
This is unlike anything I've ever seen before.
I'm Stephanie Young. Listen to Love Trapped on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
What if mind control is real?
If you could control the behavior of anybody around you, what kind of life would you have?
Can you hypnotically persuade someone to buy a car?
When you look at your car, you're going to become overwhelmed with such good feelings.
Can you hypnotize someone into sleeping with you?
I gave her some suggestions to be sexually aroused.
Can you get someone to join your cult?
NLP was used on me to access my subconscious.
Mind Games, a new podcast exploring NLP, aka Neuro-Linguistic Programming. Is it a self-help miracle, a shady hypnosis scam, or both? Listen to Mind Games on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
This is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed Human.